All right, so Marissa, you're going to let people in, and thank you and welcome. And let's see, so three, so we have Lori, Shannon, Maren, Marissa, Jonathan, and we have the mayor, and we have Dr. LeClaire. So let's have a roll call vote, and let's begin this meeting. Okay, so Shannon?
Shannon Dunham here.
Marissa?
Marissa Crary here.
Lori? You're on mute.
Yes, I did the opposite. Laurie Garcia here.
Maren?
Aaron Goldstein here.
Jonathan?
Jonathan Schmidt here.
Mayor?
Mary LaChapelle here.
Cindy Kuzynski here. So this meeting has begun. Welcome to the August 11th, 2020 school committee meeting. And hold on, I need to press my record. I don't know why it paused. This is like a crazy night tonight. Welcome. Dr. LeClaire, do you have any announcements?
I do have a few announcements. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. We're working on our remote model of instruction that was voted on by the school committee last week. In the coming weeks, families can expect more information related to daily schedules, attendance, and grading. Chromebooks will be available for all students this year. However, I do want to be transparent and let you know that we have learned that some technology will be delayed by a few weeks. There was an issue at the border, and this will impact primarily our elementary students, but we have some older machines that will be made available to families that need them for the first few weeks. Also, just want to take a moment to recognize our amazing graduates. They were slated to have an in-person graduation this week, but due to COVID, it was canceled. And instead, they will be having a virtual awards ceremony on Thursday night. And finally, we're awaiting guidance regarding fall sports. The initial discussions with the commissioner indicated that no fall sports for school districts that chose to begin in remote. However, today, DESE indicated, the Department of Ed indicated that they would defer to the MIAA and the decision that the MIAA puts forward, which is still forthcoming. So that's all I have to report. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Marissa, do we have correspondence?
We have a gift to vote on. Let me
Okay.
pull that up. All right, so we have a nice correspondence about this, so I'll just read it. Isabel Izzy Diedrich generously donated $400 worth of books to Center Pepin School. Izzy was unable to celebrate her birthday as usual this year due to COVID-19. She decided to ask family and friends to purchase books to donate to Center Pepin School. She was especially interested in having her family and friends buy books to celebrate diversity, equity, and inclusion, as she indicated that oftentimes the school's books do not have students who look like her in them, and she wanted to make sure that other Center Pepin students have representation in our collection. Izzy took this as an opportunity to make a difference in our school community. We appreciate Izzy's generosity, so I would like to make a motion to please accept Izzy's amazing, kind, and thoughtful donation to our school of this $400 worth of books.
I second that.
I think, yeah, everybody wants to second that. But for Sue's sake, does anybody know who was faster?
Shannon was faster. Let Shannon go.
Faster, okay, so we'll say that Shannon, I don't want to make it too hard on Sue. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor, we will roll call vote. Shannon?
Shannon Dunham, aye. Thank you.
Marissa?
Marissa Curry, aye.
Lori?
Laurie Garcia, aye.
Maren?
Aaron Goldstein, aye, with a very big thank you. Great job.
Jonathan?
Jonathan Schmidt, aye.
And Mir. Oh, you're on mute.
Mary LaChapelle, aye.
Okay, and Cynthia Kuzynski, aye. And we do thank you very, very much. That's an incredible, incredible gift. Okay, awesome. So now we're going to begin public speak. And I know there's a lot of people who want to talk. Ask that you raise your hand. I'm going to constantly, if you see me looking down and it looks like I'm not paying attention, I am writing down everybody's names and I will try to get everybody in. So please use the signal. Does everybody know, hopefully, down at the bottom where to raise your hand that you would like to talk? And I will also be looking at the chat. Lori, unmute, and then you wanted to say something. Yeah.
Just reminding everyone of the 2 minutes because people have wonderful things to say, but the meetings go far too long when people go over 2 minutes. We've had a lot of meetings lately and some people have had their portion of public speak last 5, 6, 7 minutes. And if we don't start by saying 2 minutes, then it's rude to then call people on it. So maybe our co-host can be the timer. Is that a good idea?
Yeah, that's a great idea. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Thank you.
I was going to truly encourage people. There are going to be a number of people speaking. So if you don't get to say everything in your 2 minutes, I'm sure you will see that somebody has hopefully covered the extra points that you would like to put in. So Marissa, I'm going to let you begin. And I am just scrolling through to write down names so that I make sure we don't forget anybody.
Well, I'll just go in the order of the hands up that I see here. So we'll start with Myra.
Hello. Good evening. I'll do my best to speak quickly. Thank you, everyone. So here's my public speak. It says, this has been a year of uncertainty. It's a year in which the community of Easthampton, students, parents, administrators, educators, support staff, and municipal staff, including the mayor and superintendent, have confronted unparalleled challenges of learning, health, social, emotional well-being, and attempted to make solutions to meet the needs of our community, acknowledging trauma, technological challenges, economic hardship, and even food insecurities. COVID-19 has exposed the vulnerabilities and inequities experienced in our community and the educational system. COVID-19 has made many in our community aware and aligned of the plight and fight for students and families to receive an equitable education. In attending many public meetings, I could see that parents could put themselves in position to understand the challenges of parents and caregivers of frontline workers, and put themselves in a position to understand the challenges of parents of children requiring modified and special education instruction, put themselves in positions to understand single working parents, and even put themselves in position to understand the challenges of parents of students of color and parents of English language learners, and see the placement of a school resource officer as a racial justice issue. Parents that have attended forums, committee meetings, have developed a common understanding that inequity in service delivery at no fault of our dedicated, hardworking, and innovative educators resulted in learning gaps, missed opportunities, and lost connections. I anticipate that without a robust and creative wraparound services, there'll be wider gaps in engagement, wider gaps in achievement, and greater variability in the well-being of students and families in this community and around this country. During this time of COVID-19, our students, parents, educators, and community need services which enhance and innovate the climate of learning. So taken from the vocals, services that support how students feel, adults and students value diversity, manage dynamics of difference, and avoid stereotypes. Support the extent students feel that there is social connection and respect between staff and teachers and students, and between students and peers. Also support the extent that students feel engaged intellectually, emotionally, behaviorally in the classroom, whether it be virtual, and in the extent that students or their parents are engaged in school life. Support the extent that students feel a bond to the school and the extent the adults and students support the emotional needs of students. Also, support the extent that students feel physically safe within the school environment. Support the extent that students report different types of bullying behaviors. Support the extent that students feel instructional environment is collaborative, relevant, challenging, supporting. Support the extent that students have access to support systems that effectively support their social, emotional, and mental health and well-being. And for the sake of time, I'll move on. These points are taken from the Google survey. Our educators, students, support staff need full support in all means of funding to make sure that there are positions that support student well-being and positive learning climates. In uncertain economic times where there's a risk of layoff, being fiscally responsible and reallocating budgeted money and searching for funds and grants that support that meet those instructional, technological, and emotional support needs is imperative. Qualified educators, social workers, counselors, trauma-informed school staff, and recruitment of culturally and linguistically diverse staff, and expanding cultural competent education practice that are founded in anti-bias and anti-racism are needed. We need a school budget and a mindset that supports and reflects and meets these needs. I hope I made it in under 2 minutes.
Okay, Marissa, are you timing?
I have not been timing, but I can start doing that and kind of put up a 30-second signal or something like that.
Yeah, that would help. Okay, thank you. Okay, Louise?
Yeah.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yes.
Hello. I wrote an email earlier today and I sent it to everybody in the committee. And I want to thank Dr. LeClaire for responding to me. But this is about the SRO issue in Easthampton. I'm going to read my email that I sent earlier. My name is Louis Ramos and I'm 44 years old. I live here in Easthampton since 2015. I came from Puerto Rico at the age of 3 and I was raised by grandparents. And most of my life, I lived in Northampton since 6th grade. My grandfather was ex-military, and my grandmother was a housewife. I was always taught to respect others. It didn't matter what they did for work, what color they were, just respect everybody. One of the first encounters with the police I had was in 6th grade during the DARE program, and that's a drug abuse resistance education program. It was during that program that I was introduced to the police. An officer by the name of Brian Rust was a DARE teacher. I learned a lot during that, not just about the drugs, but that this police officer was looking out for potential dangers that we could encounter in the coming critical years of our young lives. It was here that made me want to go into the law enforcement field. I grew up in Hampton Gardens in Northampton, and at the time, Hampton Gardens was considered the ghetto of Northampton. As I got older, I became friendly with the officers that would patrol the complex. Because of this connection, I was lucky enough to be in the book Hometown by Tracy Kidder, and that's a book about Northampton if you don't know. This probably would never happen if I didn't have that nice experience with that DARE officer at a young age. My grandparents' upbringing and the introduction of the police officer at that young age is what led me in the right direction. I grew up with many friends who ended up going in the wrong direction, many to jail. My son is going to be a first grader at Maple Street. I teach him to respect everyone no matter what they do for work or what color they are, just like my grandparents did with me. I explained to him the role of the police officer. And to think that we're trying to argue or defend why we should have a police officer in a school building is crazy to me. I think the positives outweigh the negatives. I'm not even talking about the police officer who stops a gunman from entering the school. A police officer in a school done the right way can save lives in many ways. It could change our kids' views of police officers in a positive way instead of all the negative things that are going on now. I hope that when my child attends the new middle school, that there will be an SRO. If a police officer can steer a couple kids' lives the right way every year, then their job has been completed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Kelly Brown?
Hi, I'm Kelly Brown. I have a 4-year-old preschooler. I just wanted to touch upon something that was mentioned on the Friday meeting. There was a talk around partnership groups. I don't remember the correct terminology, but partnership groups with families, having some direct communication with parents in different grade levels, and then also school committee members. And I just really wanted to say that I really, really strongly encourage that idea. At the special education meeting for preschool that we had last night, there were several families that seemed interested in that. I have one other parent who is also on board with helping me sort of spearhead that at the preschool level. So I just really wanted to encourage that and hope that that continues as part of the talks in the ongoing development of the remote learning plan and as we continue progressing throughout the school plan this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn Cushing?
Getting my technology ready. I'm Carolyn Cushing. I live at 143 Main Street, so I live across the street from Pepin Center. I'm looking out the window at it right now. And so I'm coming tonight to address a particular issue. As a community, we need to accelerate the elimination of bias and racism from our institutions, especially the schools that are so foundational to community life. And that's why I'm here, even though I am not a parent, because what happens in the school impacts the whole of Easthampton. And as I heard Myra talk about, the pandemic has had unequal impacts, and we see the fault lines of race and access and discrimination in our community. And when the pandemic arrived, we as a community were already being called to examine what was happening in our schools and called to do better, most directly through the 2017 State Attorney General's investigation into civil rights violations at the high school. They found a pattern of ongoing racist and other bias-related conduct dating back several years. So it's related to the institution, not individuals. In particular, and there's some detail here, they found that Black students were disciplined at approximately 4 times the rate of white students, and Hispanic students were disciplined at approximately 3 times the rate of white students. Then a program was put in place, restorative justice orientation, and that improved things, but the bias still persisted. So to address it, we need to be looking long-term. We need to be monitoring what happens. We need to do things even in a pandemic. And really important to listen to the Black, Indigenous, people of color students and their parents, some of who are here and speaking, and take seriously what they are saying. I have heard from my friends, my colleagues, my neighbors, that the school resource officer position would not be helpful for moving us forward. And because we know we have a pattern of discrimination and bias, it's not about individuals doing things, it's a pattern. It'd be very cautious to have a position that could then, feed this idea of a prison pipeline. So that's me. And thank you for your hard work in difficult times.
Thank you. Sarah Amoroso?
Hi, I'm here. Just give me a second. I am a parent of a upcoming 5th grader, a incoming kindergartner, and a 3rd grader. Those 2 are at Maple School. I have a lot of concerns about having a school resource officer present in the schools. We for the past several years, as you know, because you are tasked with implementing it, have been under an agreement with the state attorney general regarding the climate in our schools. And we have been, people in the schools, us as a community, and you as the school committee have been working hard on this. However, I also think that it is important to think beyond the scope of what is prescribed to us and to consider as a whole what our values are and what is important to us, to our children, and to the future of our city. Sorry, I've just lost my train of thought a little bit, but I do not feel that directing our scarce resources towards a police officer in schools is the best use of it. And that does not mean that the police officers don't care. It doesn't mean that they're negative actors or purposefully bad, but like any tool, and police officers are a tool of how we administer justice in our society, you need to choose the right tool for the right purpose. And we need to make a choice that will lead our city in the right direction. And I don't believe that having police officers in school is that choice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Casey Corsello.
Hi, everyone. First, I want to thank all of you. Feels like we've been spending a lot of time together, so thank you for all your hard work. I also want to say I have respect for the Easthampton Police Department. And as a business owner, when my business was vandalized, they were there and they called and let us know that there was an issue, so I appreciate that. I also want to say that I have so much respect for our educators, our teachers, those that are working in our buildings. Our teachers, educators, many have master's degrees. Our administrators have PhDs. They spend a lot of time doing professional development, and they're experts on childhood development. And those are the people that I want in our school buildings. I want people that know children, that know trauma, that know what issues with social emotional issues are, and those that are experts in dealing with our children. Someone said it's great to have another adult in the building. So I want an adult in the building that is going to address trauma in children, that has the expertise on dealing with our children. And so I don't believe that we need a school resource officer. I was on the school committee when we were investigated by the Attorney General's office. I think that there haven't been many violent incidences in our schools. And I think that we can do better to really address more of what the causes are by having a trauma-informed education. And then our teachers can handle it. A friend of mine says she knows how to safely restrain a child. She is trained to safely restrain a child without causing them harm if they are in trouble. So I feel like, we can use the money I know we can't use it for anything else, but I don't think that we need the school resource officer. Again, it's nothing personal. And I think that we can invest and get grants that look to deal with trauma in our students. So thank you.
Thank you. Eric. Eric?
Sorry.
That's okay.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your time. My name is Eric Poulin, 68 Parsons Street, born and raised and lifelong Easthampton resident. I'm also a professor of library and information science at Simmons University. So when the announcement about the grant for the school resource officer came out, I thought it would be my responsibility to do a bit of research, and I undertook the last couple of weeks a pretty widespread examination of the literature that exists, focusing on peer-reviewed scientific studies in the United States regarding school resource officers. And time again, I'd be more than happy to share any and all of these studies with the committee. There's no tangible connection between school resource officers and increased student safety, increased student engagement, or student success. I'll cite a couple of examples here. In 2016, a study by Dr. Matthew Terriot from the University of Tennessee actually found evidence that school resource officers directly decreased student connectedness with their institutions. In 2014, Dr. Michael Schlosser, I might be mispronouncing that name, but in the International Journal of Criminal Justice Studies, found that school resource officers play multiple roles, but, and I'm quoting the study here, of these three roles, law officer is the primary role. However, the dominance of this role contributes to the racist practices that already exist in society. This is in a law enforcement journal. A further examination of the literature finds multiple examples of officer overreach, including in 2019, when a 6-year-old in Orlando was arrested by a school resource officer for kicking a classmate, a school resource officer slamming and dragging an 11-year-old in North Carolina, and one in Arkansas this past February, who was relieved of his duties for choking a high school student. I realize Chief Alberti tends to have a community-based policing approach, and I totally applaud that. We're not Orlando, we're not North Carolina. We should be focused on Easthampton. But with that in mind, so the peer-reviewed studies are intended to predict future behavior of officers. And I would like to then also echo the words of Mayor LaChapelle earlier in the newspaper earlier today, in that if these instances, if there's not widespread crime happening in Easthampton schools, why are we doing this? So I will at this point step away and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mindy Jenkins.
Cindy, she's having internet issues. She'll be back.
Okay. Jen Markey.
Hi there, my name is Jen Markey. I live at 45 Ridgewood Terrace. I also wanted to speak on the matter of school resource officers, not from the perspective of a parent, although I do care deeply about the schools in Easthampton, but from the perspective of the daughter of a social worker who works in an alternative school for high-risk youth. My mother's school is one of those schools that many people, even in this call, might think needs a school resource officer. A lot of her students have a history of violent crime. And one thing that I've consistently taken away from conversations with her is that the presence of a police officer in these charged moments where students are learning how to perhaps deal with conflict or might be overwhelmed because of something else going on in their lives, having the presence of a uniformed officer often raises the tension. And unfortunately, the officer who works at her school is not well equipped with years of training and years of experience in de-escalating situations, understanding what students need in a difficult situation like that, and defusing the situation rather than escalating it by perhaps shouting orders or trying to physically step between students. It's not a matter of needing to train school resource officers more. It's not a matter of my thinking that any individual school resource officer is not a good officer and not dedicated to helping the community. I think it's a matter of who's an appropriate intervention at a school. And in the case of police officers, I think that a school is a type of community that is not best served by that sort of presence. Thank you all so much for taking the time to hear me and many others out, and I look forward to learning more.
Thank you. Next is Bob Alberti, Chief.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us. Myself, Detective Rogalski, who's our current SRO, and Officer Mitch Seeke. We're here to listen clearly to our community and address any questions, specific questions regarding the SRO program. Obviously, the police department supports our SRO program, particularly the amazing work that Detective Rogalski has accomplished over the years. Our SRO program has been in place my entire career, but ultimately we will support the decision of the school community and certainly the community at large. Our program's continuously evolving, and this may very well be part of the evolution process. But there's some confusion with our SROs in our community in Easthampton, speaking locally. So with that, I'll defer to Detective Rogalski in a minute, but one thing I want to make really clear. One is our SROs are not uniformed officers parading up and down the corridors like a roll. They're in plain clothes, and Rick will probably speak to this better than I can, but oftentimes he's misidentified as a teacher or a counselor, oftentimes. So we're not the uniformed police presence that is being purported or misled in this group. And as far as the AG's report and incident, the other thing that needs to be clear is that our SRO at the time was out injured. So I understand the systematic issues with the high school at the time, but to continuously pin this on our SRO is another complete misnomer. It's a spin. It's an anti-SRO spin that's not warranted, as our SRO at the time was out injured and not even part and parcel to this, to that particular incident that's being spoken to. So at the end of the day, obviously we're going to be in a virtual opening, so we're not putting the police officers in the brick and mortar if the SRO is to stay as it stands. But that aside, we're still going to be working actively with our community to the best we can, with the youth in our community, with community policing, the best that we can, certainly during the pandemic and during a social distancing world that we're all operating in now. And we're going to continue to do good work for this community. We are part of the community. The community is part of the police department. We are a partnership, as I stated at many meetings over and over again. The significant percentage, upwards of 70% of my police department, are members of this community. We live here, we pay taxes here, we send our kids to school here. So we have a vested interest in this community. And we are certainly here to listen to our community and abide by the wishes of the school community and the community at large. And with that, I don't think I can defer to Rick Rogalski, but hopefully he's got his hand up. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Is Mindy back on? Mindy Jenkins? I'm just trying to go in the order that I had down.
Cindy, she's just going to email her statement. She can't get in.
Okay. All right. To end, so you might want her to just log off and we come back on. And so we'll see if that's able to happen later. Okay, Jen Hamilton? Jennifer Hamilton?
Hi. Yep. Hold on. I'm putting my video on.
That's good.
Hi. I have a student who goes to Easthampton High School, and I also work in the office there. I have witnessed positive things with our SRO. He has led students in the right direction many times. I've also witnessed students that might come in on a Monday morning and want to speak with him about something that happened over the weekend, and they'll go in his office, speak to him. Obviously, they feel relieved when they leave. Whatever they said, I do not know, but I know it was positive interactions. I also have a son who graduated in 2016, and he had positive interactions with the SRO. In fact, he just told me a few minutes ago he would walk down the hallway and they'd do high fives. The SRO was in plain clothes, not dressed up in uniform, carrying a weapon. They usually go out and chat with some students. Students, again, will often come in and speak with them. I'm just in support, definitely in support of an SRO. It's a positive thing in our school.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rick Rogalski? Did you get frozen? You might have to log off and come back on. No, we can't hear you. So things, if you have video on and you are not on the school committee, can you turn your video off? Might help. And really only turn it on if you're speaking during public speak. So I see some people with their videos on, and if they can turn their cameras off, that might help. We're having a little snag. I'm going to take a peek through, and I think we just have people to turn off their cameras. Okay, that's looking. Rachel, can you turn yours off? Thank you.
I'm trying to find that.
It should be a little camera down to you. Go. All right. So Rick will come back to you. Let's do Mitch.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Mitch Seeke. I'm a full-time police officer for the city of Easthampton. Just a little bit about me quick. I'm a Western Mass native, lived in the Williamsburg area for the last 50 years. I consider myself part of the fabric of the local community, and a brief summary of my career is I began a career 30 years ago, 1989, served as a police officer in Williamsburg, Goshen, Northampton, Easthampton. For a decade, I served as a neighborhood resource officer, working in a demographic made up of primarily Hispanic, Black, Vietnamese, Cambodian, and white. I also served as an SRO for Northampton High School for a year. I identify with myself as a father, a husband, and a community leader. I just wanted to put to rest the myth behind the school-to-prison pipeline. Back in the early 2000s, the schools and the SRO programs were responsible for implementing the disturbance and disruption laws, which were zero-tolerance policies and practices. This disproportionate tendency of minors and young adults from disadvantaged backgrounds to become incarcerated because of increasingly harsh school and municipal policies became known as the school-to-prison pipeline. This is no longer a practice. District schools and police agencies such as Easthampton have formed an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, which basically says, in order to promote school safety, maintaining positive school climate for all students, families, and staff, enhance cultural understanding between students and law enforcement, promote school participation and completion by students, facilitate appropriate information sharing, and form the parties a collaborative relationship to best serve the school community. I just want to point out there is a lot of data out there from NASRO, the National Association of SROs, the Johns Hopkins University study, Safe School-based enforcement through collaborative understanding and respect. This was an organization developed by the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Justice. A few high points are you need to recruit and hire effective SROs. Rick Rogalski has great qualities and he's a great mentor. You need to keep SROs, and school personnel well trained. Continue to evaluate SROs and school personnel and keep them well trained. Some of the training our SROs have to this day are interpersonal communications, adolescent psychology, social cognitive development, cultural competence, implicit bias training, ability to enhance positive interactions, conflict avoidance, de-escalation skills to prevent violent encounters that disrupt classrooms and the community, establishing clear boundaries between school discipline and criminal justice. So I would just like to have added those few things. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick, are you able to come back on and unmute? And let's see if it's working. Unmute. You have to hit the mute button. Wait. Rick, you're still muted. Let's see if I can.
Cindy, that's a audio connection. It's not a mute button that's showing up there.
See, I'm
on my phone.
There you go. You're good.
All right. Yeah, I'm having trouble with my computer audio, so I dialed in.
Okay.
Am I good to go?
You're good.
All right. Well, thank you for letting me talk. I actually was slated to give a presentation to the school committee back in the spring, but COVID kind of threw a wrench in that. So I'll try to keep it under the 2 minutes, and it's going to be a very abbreviated version. As the chief said, I do not wear a uniform in the schools. The only time I wear a uniform would be when I teach DARE, because that's part of the DARE mandate for curriculum, and it's a soft uniform. It's not my full duty belt and gear and all that stuff. So I'm going to start with Officer Seeke mentioned NASRO. I would encourage everybody to visit NASRO.com. It has a lot of excellent information. What is a school resource officer? And I'm quoting from NASRO. A school resource officer, by federal definition, is a career law enforcement officer with sworn authority who is deployed by an employing police department or agency in a community-oriented policing assignment to work in collaboration with one or more schools. It is recommended that agencies select officers carefully for SRO assignments and that officers receive at least 40 hours of specialized training in school-oriented policing before being assigned. NASRO has a 40-hour basic class. I've attended that. I've also attended their advanced SRO school. Next thing is, what is the appropriate role of a school resource officer? Again, I'm going to quote from NASRO to start. The goals of well-founded SRO programs include providing safe learning environments in our nation's schools, providing valuable resources to school staff members, fostering positive relationships with youth, developing strategies to resolve problems affecting youth and protecting all students so that they can reach their fullest potentials. NASRO considers it a best practice to use a triad concept, and this defines the three main roles of school resource officers. And those three roles are educator, guest lecturer, informal counselor and mentor, and law enforcement officer. So what I do mostly in the schools is the informal counselor mentoring part of it. Is most of my time is spent on building relationships. I do not discipline students in school. I don't suspend students, expel students, or give students detentions. I'm much like a teacher. If I see something happening that's not violent in nature and is a school-related issue, I just report that to the administration, and they handle the discipline. I'm a member of the SST, which is the student support team at both the high school and the middle school. And that's where we talk and we bring up, teachers can refer students to the SST team. We talk about the best way to get them the services they need and to get them on the right track. I also relay information to the administrators at the schools involving if over the weekend or off school time there's police involvement with a student or family, and that involvement may affect the school environment or climate or require additional supports in the schools, then we talk about those issues. I'm involved with Jan Norman's STRAT program, which is students and teachers raising awareness together. And that's mainly a bullying program and talking about treating people, how we treat each other as students in the schools. I teach DARE at White Brook at the 5th grade level. I've instructed in the physics class at the high school around my training as a crash reconstructionist. We talk about, angular momentum, inline momentum, and how crashes occur and what we can do with math to figure out speeds and stuff like that. Prior to the elimination of the health teacher position at White Brook, I was involved with the health class at White Brook. And on most days, I'm out in front of the high school greeting students as they come into school or saying goodbye to students as they're leaving school with the principal. I'm always looking for ways to ensure the safety of the students and staff through CEPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design. That's looking at the building design and seeing if this signage will help or if there's things that need to be changed that will help the safety of the school. I was involved a little bit with the new school as far as safety features. I'm part of the safety team at all the schools. I've also spoken with the We the People class when they were getting ready for their competitions, usually around search and seizure. And I work with parents and students around issues both in and out of school. As far as the school to prison pipeline thing that keeps coming up, since being appointed the SRO in September of 2017, I have not arrested a single student in the school. I've only referred one student to the DA's office, and that was strictly for to get them put in a program so that they wouldn't get a record and it wouldn't go on their permanent record as far as criminal charges. And I just briefly touch on some of the important trainings I've been to. There's been a lot more, and I can provide a more detailed list if anybody likes it, would like it. Interaction with youth. I was an instructor at the academy and within our own department.
Rick, I'm sorry. I've got to ask you just to finish your thought because we really can't have a presentation right now.
Okay.
Can I just add something? Because there are people that are holding up fingers. Everyone has gone over from our first speaker who was at least 5 minutes. So I did not want to be rude to anyone. That's why I made this statement before anyone started. But please do not be rude now because it's gone over for every single person and we have this taped that can verify it. So in a Zoom meeting, it's impossible. Poor Marissa's trying to show people, but we can't do it. If anyone has a wonderful idea how to time people without just slamming them down, let us know. But please stop showing fingers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lori. That is true. Everybody has gone beyond and we're trying to be patient with everybody. So Rick, if you could just finish your thought and then we'll continue. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I'm very passionate about what I do. I love being in the schools and helping children. I wake up every day knowing that I can have a positive impact on a child's life. I think we'll be doing the students and the schools a disservice if we get rid of the SRO program. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Daley?
Hi, everybody. My name is Christy Daley. I sent an email out to the committee, but I just wanted to really quick go over what I wrote. I'm the school nurse at Whitebrook Middle School. I'm also a parent of a rising 11th grader. As the school nurse, I work closely with Officer Rogalski. We are on the student support team together and on many occasions have been able to assist each other with information regarding student safety and well-being at home as well as in school. When Officer Rogalski's in our schools, he's not intimidating to the students at all. All I ever see is a mentor to our students. They do not fear him. They look up to him. He's their friend. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And you were definitely under 2 minutes. So thank you.
Dinner's ready.
Then I have Lisa's iPhone. That's all I have is Lisa's iPhone. So could you say your full name? And
Hi.
Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Lisa McCullough, and I'm also an employee at Easthampton High School. I'm going to be quick. I just want to say that I totally support having the SROs in the building. I wish that everybody that was speaking could actually see the positive impacts that we see on a daily basis, you know, sometimes with having Officer Rogalski in the building. So that's all I want to say, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Jean Francis. We had Jean Francis's hand up. All right, and then I see just iPhone, and I need you to identify yourself and say where you're from.
No. Oh, no. Hello, I'll take this opportunity to speak. This is Chad Mayor from 12 Kingsbury Way. I just want to say that I'm a huge advocate for the resource officer. I think it's a value to our students, and not only to our students, but activity. That's all.
Oh, I think we just lost you. I'm so sorry. Back in a minute. I'm scrolling through and hold on. I see Desiree.
Hi, my name is Desiree Grebe. I just wanted to say that I'm in full support of the SRO program. My kids are just starting their school journey. I know it's a very important time for us to educate our children and have every caring adult that is possible during this pandemic that we have going on there for our kids. I do feel that we can make this program work for everybody's behalf. I think it's worth actually hearing the actual presentation that the SRO Rogalski was going to actually provide for the committee so that we can better understand what the actual program is going to do. And then maybe we can have our voices heard as well as to what will help our younger kids better understand the community role that we have with our police department and how we can build that bridge between the youth of our community as well as the department itself. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Bri.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Bri Eichstaedt. I am not a resident, but I am the health agent for the city. So I was hoping that I could just say a few words about Rick.
Sure.
Okay. So the couple of things that Rick has been involved with, at least with my department, is the Easthampton Healthy Youth Coalition. I don't know if anyone touched on that, but that is out of the health department, and Rick has been an integral member of that coalition. He's at every meeting and he gives really good input. Anytime that I've had to work with the school, Rick is usually my first contact. We do an emergency dispensing site in the event that we have to do a mass vaccination, which I never thought we would have to do, but we may with COVID going on. And Rick, again, is my first contact. He's there with us. He helps us plan. And for example, with the graduation that we unfortunately had to cancel, he's on that call. So I think he's a great resource, at least to me and to city department heads, anytime that he's kind of a great bridge between the school and us. So I would just like to say that. And I know, at least for me, when I was in high school, if you ever had a bad day, it was always helpful to have that one teacher that you could kind of just go hang out with for 15 minutes and just kind of vent to. I didn't have an SRO when I was at Hampshire Regional, but we would kind of have a teacher that we were friends with. And so I would have loved to have an SRO to kind of just go relax and vent if I was having a bad day. So I'm in support of the program. I'm not a resident, but as an employee, he's been a great resource to me.
Thank you. Jen Sandler.
Hi, my name is Jen Sandler. I'm the parent of a rising fourth grader. I'm also faculty in anthropology at UMass, and I teach on power and inequality in the United States. And I also spent my career before doing social scientific research and becoming an academic and teaching, which is what I've done for the past 15 years. I'm getting old. Working with youth, working with often very youth who had been pushed out of school, who had really challenging experiences in the systems that were supposed to protect them. I was trained in de-escalation, and I know how hard it is. And I know that people who had social work degrees did a better job than me. I know that this is not, what I try to teach my students when trying to talk about structures and how should we structure our institutions so that they do their job of caring for people, is that you have to take the individual identities out of it. This is not Rick, that was a totally moving speech, and it's, you have a lot of people who are testifying to your personal goodness and usefulness. I don't know Rick. It sounds like, if this was a job interview, he should be hired, and that's great that he's doing a great job. But that isn't how you structure, that isn't how you make decisions about structures. I was really grateful to Eric Poulin for actually pulling the research. As a librarian, I was going to present, I was going to talk about a bunch of research and would be happy to send some citations, many citations, but social scientists, many who did not originally believe in the school to prison pipeline, when you do research on it, what you find is that overall having police officers in the school exacerbates inequalities and structural racism and the experiences of students of color with harsh discipline. It sounds like, I hear people saying, well, that's not happening here. Well, if we're talking about structures, let's pretend that Bob Alberti is not the chief, that Rick is not the SRO, and that we get a chief and an SRO that we don't like, and that are also doing their job as police officers, right? Do we want that SRO? Because you can find anecdotes of great cops and terrible cops, right? And this isn't about lining up and saying all cops are great or all cops are terrible, right? We can say that our cops are the best. And maybe that's true. I don't know. I haven't studied, our cops. I don't know any of the police in town. But what I'm telling you is that I know that not all students feel safer when there's a police officer in the school. And because some students feel mentored by an individual person who happens to be a police officer, doesn't mean that that is the right person to mentor our students. It takes a lot of training to really understand how to reach kids. It takes more than 40 hours. I'm sorry, but it does. And social workers and counselors have hundreds and hundreds of clinical hours that they're supervised in learning how to do this. The DARE program, some people might like it, some people might hate it. It is one of the most studied programs, prevention programs, and it is ineffective. There are meta-analyses, which means studies of hundreds of studies that show that it does not prevent drug abuse. It doesn't. The only positive studies are basically are poorly designed studies that basically say that afterwards people say that they won't do as many drugs, but you follow them 6 months later and they do as many drugs as the people who didn't go through the program. That's what the research says about the DARE program. So we should be doing prevention programs that work. We should be structuring our schools so that the professionals who are working with our kids understand how to do that the best, right? And it may be, Rick, that you should have been a social worker. Maybe you should be a social worker and you happen to be a police officer. But when we're saying we're going to structure 2 SROs into our school district, what we're saying is whatever police chief we have, whatever police officers we happen to have, we're going to end up with 2 police officers in our schools, whoever they happen to be. And the chances that over the next decade or 2 decades that we're going to get a bad one is not that low, right? They don't prevent violence, they exacerbate inequality. The program as a whole, not you as individuals. And you can love the individuals who are in a program. I'm sure that there would be people who might love me if I was, given 40 hours of police training and put on the street. I'm sure I could build some good relationships. Would I be a good cop? I would be a really bad cop, right? Don't do that.
Jen, can we have you finish your thought, because
I'm done. Thank you for your work, and I really appreciate everybody on this call.
Thank you so much. Jean Francis did come back, I think. So
finally, yes.
Well, we called on you, but it wasn't.
I know. I got it figured out. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first, I also want to say how really much I appreciate all of you for doing. I was on the school committee meeting the other night, and I tell you, you all are something. So I really appreciate it. But in speaking to this, to the SRO and to what's going on in our schools, I was here when the kids walked out of the school 3 years ago. And I will say, Bob Alberti and Rick, that was the son of the SRO that provoked that. So I think that's important for us to think about. I think Rick probably is a really nice guy. And I'm glad I agree with I echo what Jen just said. Rick, maybe you should be a social worker. You sound like a good guy. But I think that we need to think about that they're not always good cops, so. Anything, which I also sent to the school committee. Did I get messed up? I'm okay.
You came back.
I sent letters to all of the school committee, which unfortunately only heard back from 1 or 2, which I was sorry about. And I appreciate Allison getting back to me. And also another issue that I want to talk about. But I think we need to look at the systemic, what it means for a child of color, whether they're black or brown or what, if they're a color, not white, how they feel about a police officer in the school. So I think we need to really look at that. And I don't know where the police got their information about the school to the prison, but I think they need to look at a lot of information, because there's a lot of information that truly supports that. And it doesn't just have to be overt racism. It can be covert. Like I have a friend who has a child at Center Street a black child, and she and her grandson is always inappropriately or disproportionately, I don't know what the word is, proportionately disciplined more than any other kid, any other white child in that room. So I really think we need to look at the racism in our schools and the racism with our professionals, our teachers. We need to be looking at that and just bust the racism in this little town. I mean, we really need to start somewhere. And just to say, I'm going to hush because I know my time is probably almost up, but I want to say too that Allison, I appreciate you getting back to me with the link to how to get into this meeting, and also to tell me the time, because as we are on one thing too, I just want to say, I think it's really unbelievable that the school committee didn't know about this SRO grant. I mean, I'm kind of rambling all over the place, but the school committee didn't know anything about it, until it had come through. So I mean, what does this mean for the school committee? So, and if we're talking about,
oh no,
well, we're not talking about transparency, but if we do look at transparency and trust, why couldn't we get into the school committee meeting? I had to write Allison to get that. And there were 2 different times on the city page, it says 7 o'clock. And in the agenda of the school committee, it says 6 o'clock. That does not bring trust up, especially as we're looking at such difficult issues right now. And we cannot deny either how racism and police run in this country after everybody in the world witnessed George Floyd being by a white police officer's knee on his neck. So that's all I have to say. Thank you, and thanks again for your good work.
Thank you. Tess. And anybody who's already spoken, we can only allow people to speak once. So if you have already spoken, I will not be able to call on you again to speak. Thank you. Tess?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi there. So my name is Tess McCollum. I lived in Easthampton all my life. Some of you may recognize me. I was a student at EHS only a couple of years ago. I graduated in 2017. I was on school committee for a bit. So I just want to speak to the SRO position as well. I don't know Rick. I graduated before he stepped up to the position. So Rick, you seem like a great man. I have never met you, and I don't know how you've changed the school and SRO position in your time here. But I just wanted to speak a little bit of how maybe a student perspective to the SRO position, especially at the time when I was there, when I graduated during the time of the walkout. And before that, I've had an SRO in the school my whole time in Easthampton. And I just want to emphasize, maybe from my perspective as a white person in the school as well, that having the SRO at the time at the school really did not make an impact on me or the students in my friend group or in my circle. Knowing that there was SRO there really made me feel uncomfortable. And I cannot imagine the feelings of the BIPOC students among me and how they felt having and knowing there's a police presence there. And again, Rick, don't know you, and maybe you are the new leader that maybe these students need, but from what you're describing to me, to have someone and have the only method of counseling for something that's hard in my life, potentially be a police officer, would make me feel very uncomfortable, because I would need someone, as someone mentioned earlier, like a teacher to really help me through a process. Having a authority figure where the general public's idea of them is punishment does not seem fit for me, would not seem fit for many of the people I was in school with, and the general perception of the SRO at the time of my time in Easthampton Public Schools was not positive. It was not helpful, and made me and many students feel uncomfortable, and I benefited from the system. So I just want to have everyone think about and talk to their students that they know, the people in the school system, besides staff, besides the kids who obviously think highly of Rick. I just think about the students who might not think the same, talk to them, how are they feeling? Because I know for a fact that I would not feel comfortable. So, but school committee and everyone here, thank you. You're doing an amazing job, and I hope everyone's staying safe.
Thank you. So I hope I don't say this wrong. Pasqualina?
Hi, everybody. I'm a resident and I'm also the city arts coordinator here in Easthampton. I have a lot to say on the matter, but I'm really here to listen tonight. I actually had some dental work this morning and I'm just going to respect where I am. I do want to explain that Myra is raising her hand because Mindy Jenkins, who originally was in the lineup to speak tonight, is still having trouble and is not able to join. And so Myra is going to read Mindy's statement. She is speaking on behalf of Mindy, so her hand was raised. So I'm just being a little facilitator here, and I hope that that's okay to allow that statement to be read. I feel like that's fair given the fact that we're having internet trouble.
Yes. Did you have anything else you wanted to say? Thank you for giving us that information.
What I will say is, I really appreciate this discussion. I appreciate public speak so much. I'm a civil servant. I take this very seriously. I take community input very seriously. I appreciate that we live in a city that welcomes this. And I love what I've seen in recent months with these Zoom meetings. The amount of community participation is very serious. And I want to acknowledge again that this is not ever about an individual, these discussions. I know Rick, I know Chief Alberti, they're colleagues of mine. I do a lot of work in the high school through my role at ECA. This is a moment in our humanity. And the good news is that citizens here in Easthampton and people all over our country are having an opportunity and being supported in this moment, in this opportunity, to ask the question, what do we want our schools to look like? What do we want our communities to look like? If they could look like anything, what would that be? And I'm not talking utopia. I'm saying let's work with all the ingredients and all the resources and all the imagination we have right here among us. And I just want everyone on this call to really be thoughtful, and everyone on the school committee to really be thoughtful, and are asking our superintendent to be thoughtful about how we want to grow our community. I appreciate what Chief Alberti said earlier, that this is always an evolving process. And I really appreciate that Chief Alberti said in his statement that he will defer to what this community wants. And I appreciate all the strong voices here. I'm not feeling incredibly articulate myself tonight, but I really do appreciate all of your great work. And I will say one last thing. We need to figure out how to hyperlink every Zoom link in every agenda and make sure the times on the website match the times on the agendas. There are so many people trying to be here for this, and many people I know each meeting and across many committees have not been able to do that. So I just want to make that note. But I would like to, make sure that Myra has a chance to read Mindy's statement, and thank you all again.
Okay. So let's have Myra read that statement, and then right now I have 4 people, and then we will continue. So Myra, can you read Mindy's statement for us?
I can do that. It's a bit long. I thought I was helping facilitate by raising multiple hands and fingers, so I didn't do that purposely to be rude or disrespectful of anyone's time. And I'll acknowledge that. These are not my words. This is from Mindy Jenkins. Pardon me, I have some visual acuity issues, and I'll be reading it from my cell phone. She says, as you know, my family and others have suffered greatly due to racism in our schools and having law enforcement tactics used in place of school discipline. Being excluded from school and labeled bad or criminal, stigmatized by teachers, parents, friends, parents of friends, and other community members has had an impact on our son. Confusion, stress, sleeplessness, seclusion, fear, depression, and anger was the result. All of this made it difficult to stay focused on school and hindered motivation to study, even desire to return to school and succeed academically. Arresting a teenager did harm. Arresting a teen for something that could have easily been addressed through the school, within the school, and through restorative justice efforts did harm. Arresting a teen who is not white for the same offense that white students escape criminal charges for did harm. Before I get to my questions, concerns about the COPS grant, I first need to address the superintendent and her statement at the 7/28 school committee meeting. Ms. LeClaire, or rather I should say Dr. LeClaire, stated that you had only met with the chief one time to discuss this grant. How could you possibly make an informed decision about the impact of adding more law enforcement to your schools after only one meeting? You also stated this grant was a back burner, and that passing it along to your grant writer, you hadn't really thought about it again, so you learned the grant had been awarded. Do you understand how tone deaf these statements are? You are supposed to have a pulse on the community and children and families that you are paid to serve. Some of those families are not white. Some of those families do not have the same benign experience with law enforcement that most certainly do. How is it that a curriculum director, grant writer, who is also the diversity coordinator, the same person who is supposed to ensure equity and diverse representation in our schools, did not think it important to inform and get input from the school committee, principals, teachers, parents, and students? After the district's poor history with SROs and the AG's findings of disparities in discipline between white students and students of color, the AG asking the school district to revise and update SRO's MOU and the requirement of having a diversity coordinator in the first place. How did it not occur to anyone that this decision would be problematic? All of the diversity initiatives in the world mean nothing if you don't understand the concepts behind them or take action to dismantle the harmful systems you uphold. You were chosen by the school committee in hopes you would do a better job than those who preceded you. Frankly, we do not have the time for your learning curve, and we do not have the time. This is not an time to wait. This is not an issue that can be simply put on the back burner. In terms of addressing the issues with keeping our current SRO and possibly adding another, the COPS grant that was awarded requires you to identify a specific crime and disorder problem and explain how funding will be used to implement community policing approaches to that problem. Can the chief superintendent or grant writer tell us what was the specific crime and the disorder problem identified in the Easthampton public school system? And how did you decide funds would be used to implement community policing? I'm having trouble understanding, based on our low crime rate, how this grant was awarded in the first place. It is quite lengthy, so I do want to respect other time, and I believe she will email you the rest, unless another person who's received this would like to continue on in Mindy's place, or if I can continue on.
So really, can email that to us. If somebody else, not school committee, wants to let's see. So it looks like
discussion.
You have it. You have it, Shannon?
Yeah, I have it up.
Geez, now I'm really confused because usually we don't have committee members in public speak, but go ahead, finish. Why don't you finish that letter?
Currently and under this grant, the SRO is required to complete the NASRO Basic Training Program. For those who aren't familiar, NASRO is a national organization that trains SROs around the country. There is testimony submitted by NASRO to a Senate subcommittee that is dedicated to the criticism of what they call advocates of the school to prison pipeline, calling it fictitious and rhetoric. As we all know, there is plenty of evidence that punitive disciplinary measures like suspensions and expulsions, as well as arrests with the presence of SROs, have led to more and more students being pushed out of schools and into the juvenile and criminal justice systems. Data from across the U.S. verifies that racial disparity in school-related arrests, increased incarceration beyond school, begins with the school-to-prison pipeline, contrary to what NASRO or our own police force believes. The school-to-prison pipeline is indeed real. How do you think marginalized students feel, knowing that the very people who deny this system even exists, a system that continues to cause harm to their communities, are responsible for training their school resource officer? Just because this district does not think it's a problem here does not mean that it's not a problematic system. We need to disrupt that system. Further, NASRO's entire basic training program is 40 hours. The area of developing relationships for diverse students gets 2 of those 40 hours. Let me repeat that, 2 of so-called diversity training. What makes you confident that this type of training program makes a police officer capable of being a de-escalation expert? Teen behavior specialist, counselor, advisor, problem solver, restorative justice professional, or culturally competent mentor. We have already seen changes in the MOU from what the AG had in place. I'm very concerned that any additional training required of the SRO during the AG agreement will expire with it. A final thought on the COPS grant. When I was researching the grant, I easily found other federal grants that would serve the schools better than adding more law enforcement. I'm not going to go over the grants that she had found, but right now especially, we need to be investing time, effort, and funds into helping teachers and students navigate online learning, adding supports for students with IEPs, and the teachers who are trying to be sure their needs are being met, and finding ways to add ethnic studies and other adverse offerings to the curriculum, not finding ways to add more police. I would like to know at what point did we move from seeking and hiring competent leaders, educators, and counselors to seeking grants for more law enforcement. Now is the time we put our talk into action. It's time we do more than symbolic gestures. Black and brown students cannot wait for us to complete our anti-racist, anti-bias learning journey. We cannot let the issues that affect them most be put on the back burner while we attend to what we consider more important things. Either we want to dismantle racist, white supremacist systems, or we do not. There's no middle ground, and this is just our last part. We need to put the accountability of our children's well-being in the hands of diverse and competent administrators, counselors, mentors, and teachers. The very last thing we should be doing is putting that responsibility in the hands of law enforcement. Thank you, Minnie Jenkins.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for letting me finish.
Thank you. It's very hard when people have really strong opinions and to speak, and we're trying, honestly, our 2-minute cutoff time that we're trying to hold to is not because we don't want to hear people, but we are simply trying to keep it manageable so that we can continue on before we lose too many people. So right now I'm seeing, let's see, I have Bo, and I'm going to check, and I think what we're going to do is we're going to have 9 more minutes of public speak, and then I'm going to close it so that we can continue on with the business of the meeting. So, Bo, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Jessica Sansusi of 19 Willow Circle. I just wanted to share on July 31st, myself and a few other parents created a Facebook group in support of the Easthampton SRO program. In 12 days, we have had 650 people join this support group. We also ran a petition for those to sign who are in favor of saving our SRO program. And as of today, we have received 444 signatures from those supporting this program. Of those signatures, 166 are Easthampton residents, 119 are parents, students, and or teachers, and 158 are residents of surrounding cities and towns who still support the program. We did not want to leave out anyone's opinion. Along with 444 signatures, we also received 77 comments. The petition and comments have been sent to all, and I hope you take the time to read them and hear from the students, staff, parents who cannot attend these meetings and speak out. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt? Matt, you have to unmute.
Okay, there we go. Sorry. I've been listening in, and I would just like to say I'm in support of the SRO. A lot of the against comments have been a lot about SATs, about the school to prison pipeline, and the disciplinary role of the SRO, which in my honest opinion, I view, and I think the school committee and the school and Easthampton residents should really shift their thinking about the SRO from a disciplinary role to a counselor role and as a bridge between the community and the police department. I mean, the arrests made by the SRO in Easthampton have been minimal and in no way constitute a pipeline. So I think that with all this talk about community policing and shifting towards that style of policing in Easthampton, I think the RO is the perfect example of community policing, because a lot of times people have a negative view of the police because usually when they're dealing with the police, it's something negative is happening. But when you expose our kids in the school to a positive leader in the police department that helps bridge the gap between the police department and the school and helps develop those relationships, it only causes a more positive relationship between the community and the police. Kids will feel safer to go to them when they have problems at home, problems with friends, if they feel threatened. Taking the SRO out of schools impacts our safety and also severs the bridge between the police and the community, thus causing more divides. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Dee Cormier?
Yes, thank you. Hi, my name is Danielle Cormier. I am a resident of Easthampton and currently have an upcoming 6th and 8th grader at the Whitebrook Middle School. And in reference to the SRO, I am in full support of the program. We have found Rick to be a great resource personally with de-escalation. And whether it's Rick or another trained SRO officer in the future, especially with the current climate, I think that they can help remove fear and distrust. That's all.
Thank you. It's looking okay. Natalie?
No, we all want to go home. And I know this meeting has been long. Thank you, everybody.
No, that's right.
My name is Natalie Gomez, and I'd like to say I have a child who goes to Center Pepin. I also have a transgender child in white. My children are Puerto Rican, white, and Pakistani. So I'm going to give you guys just a slight insight, and I'm going to keep it under 2 minutes. I'm glad that you guys had great relationships with these police officers. And again, this is not personal towards our mayor or personal towards Rick or Chief Alberti. We need to be ahead. If we're progressive like we say we are, we need to act as though we are. Hearing things like, well, we had a great relationship, when I know many children of color who go to Whitebrook, Maple Center, do not feel that way. As a parent, I can say that, yes, there are some times where teenagers are teenagers and there needs to be some sort of adult there. You agree, right? Psychologists are there. Social workers are there. There's ways that we can help our children without an officer. You want to continue doing community policing? Absolutely. Enjoy doing it outside of schools. Again, I think I might be one of the only parents or very few parents of color on this public speak. And I just want to be very clear that that is not what children of color feel. They do not feel comfortable.
Thank you. I think you finished just before you started to break up. So I am scrolling through, and right now I'm not seeing anybody else. All right. Okay. So I am going to close public speak. Thank you, everybody who spoke. And we do understand it's really hard to say all the things you feel and believe in 2 minutes. So we are not trying to harass you, and we encourage you to make them shorter. Thank you. So we're going to close public speak, and I am going to just do one quick look through. Good, we're all set. So I am going to turn this over to Dr. right now. Well, actually, we're going to do subcommittee reports. Sorry, I lost my place. And I do know Lori has an update that she would like to give. So Lori, do you want to take over right now?
Sure. And I want to thank everyone for speaking, and I didn't want to seem short with anybody. It's just I know how impassioned people become with something that is dear to their hearts and to their souls, and I just wanted to be able to move on. So we do respect everyone's opinion, and we want to try to make the right decision for the community. But I want to go back to what we've been grappling with these months and the COVID epidemic, and what we can do to educate our children who will not be in school. So I actually joined a committee that recently formed, and we were talking about the name of the committee. I believe the last thing we called it was the COVID Rapid Response Team, but that may change. And I'm not going to provide a lot of details about it because it will be an ongoing committee that will meet to see how we can best deal with the metrics. And that was the first meeting. We talked about how the metrics will determine how we move through the different phases of our remote to different hybrid options. And I feel very fortunate to be a member of that team. I'm not going to give names of everyone on there because I don't want to miss anybody, but we have a pediatrician, an epidemiologist, we have our health agent, the superintendent was there, and there are more people who, as I said, are working to make sure that we have facts and science to help us deal with how to best educate the children in a safe way. And one of the topics they came up that I do want to mention briefly is we still want to pursue the idea of getting tents, and it is not off the table that we can safely meet outdoors with our younger children, especially, to be able to have that important face-to-face contact when school starts. I'm not saying it's a done deal, but it's something that we are talking about, and medical professionals are determining the feasibility and the safety of doing such a thing. I also appreciate the emails that I've gotten and the comments tonight about our partnership groups, and it's something we still want to explore. So thank you all for being here tonight. And once again, it does take a village, and this is a very special community, and we can all do this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Do we have any other committee reports or updates?
Just the policy is meeting next Wednesday.
Policy is meeting next Wednesday. Okay.
I'll throw out something real quick since I haven't talked about the collaborative in a while, and I don't have a whole lot that I want to say necessarily because we are meeting tomorrow, at which point we'll be going over their plans for all of their sort of specialized instruction environments. I'm sure they've been grappling with a lot of the same questions as us, but I do want to let everyone on the committee know that the executive director of the collaborative, Bill Deal, after serving in his position for I believe the past 10 years, is going to be retiring at the end of this year. He was waiting for I believe, some stability to do that, and eventually reached the conclusion that he could probably keep putting it off forever. So we are entering the process of searching for a new executive director for the Collaborative for Education Services. I've agreed to be a part of the hiring process. The entire board will be doing the final interviews, but I'll be a part of a sort of earlier interview stage. So I wanted to share that with you, and if anything really interesting or insightful comes out of the meeting tomorrow, I will let you know next time.
Thank you. Those are very big shoes to fill.
Absolutely. And quite the time to step in and try to take it over.
Oh my goodness. That's going to be a tough one. All right. Before we...
Lori's got her hand up.
Lori?
I didn't want to say any names, but I forgot to say Sarah Mochek is the one who is the head of that committee. So our director of special ed and nursing. And so I shouldn't neglect to say her name. Sorry. I'm very tired.
That's okay. Okay, thank you very much. Before we talk about the SRO and the COPS grant, I just want to let everybody know. I'm sorry that there was any confusion on the website as to when our meetings start. School committee meetings start every Tuesday. Well, not every Tuesday, but right now it's every Tuesday at 6 o'clock. And there is someone who cannot see the link, please, a day or two ahead of time or even that afternoon, email the school committee. We will make sure that we get you that link and that information. We are not trying to confuse anybody. There are a few things that just happen because people go on vacation, and we are all doing this by Zoom. So please, every school committee meeting, and email us if you cannot get the link. All right? Okay, so Dr. LeClaire, do you want to about the SRO and the COPS grant? Dr. LeClaire, you...
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first I'd like to thank everyone that took the time to offer their thoughts about having a school resource officer presence in our schools. I think it's a very complex issue and a very complex time in our history. As a lifelong educator, I want to learn more about what concerns people regarding whether we do or do not have an SRO. I want to be educated. I want to read. I want to look at some of those studies that were referenced tonight by some of the people that spoke. I want to learn more from both sides about the issue. I feel like this issue deserves time and attention. After I have done that, then I would consider making a recommendation. Right now, I think we are busy designing an educational system for our students that will be engaging and motivating to them to the best of our ability. Because we are not bringing students back into our schools at the beginning of the school year, I think we have the opportunity to make the time to delve into this issue. And as I've shared with the Equity Committee, and there are some members from the Equity Committee in this meeting tonight, I recommended convening a task force made up of representatives from both sides, those for and those against having an officer in our schools, to explore how we can move forward thoughtfully. But in the end, I work for the school committee. And if you choose to move forward in directing me to submit a waiver to the Department of Education, I will move forward with that process under your direction. However, if we reread the law, there are aspects that I feel the committee and or I will need to answer before a waiver can be thoughtfully submitted. And those include providing the data that would support the reason we would not need a school resource officer in our schools, and the plans for how we will develop practices or procedures to kind of supplement if we take a school resource officer away. And people on both sides of the issue articulated things like trauma tonight and, mentoring and de-escalation. I heard many, many themes emerge tonight, and we would need a plan. There are not dollars attached to these decisions, so I would need to come up with solutions to how we would support not having a school resource officer in our buildings. So those are not things that I take lightly. I think they require thought, and I believe it is my opinion that because students are not returning to school in a few weeks, I think we have the time to have thoughtful discourse on this issue. And I welcome people that have different opinions than I do. And, I would like to learn and have that discourse with people, but I defer to the committee. So thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, you sent a request for the waiver, and I would like to talk about some confusion I have about the waiver itself and filing this waiver. But did you want to speak before we go too far with our discussions?
Just that looking at the resources, there are many factors that went towards me writing this memo. Certainly the times that we're in, also just the historical experience in the community on both sides, and looking at the culture of not only Easthampton Public Schools, but as well Easthampton in general. And I don't see the data in our schools that suggest criminality to the extent where we need to have an SRO present to prevent criminal activity. Also, the events that they assist with that we need to report under the SRO MOU don't rise to the level of criminality. I believe that the SRO position, which are filled by very experienced and well-positioned police officers in our community, should be allowed to do exactly that, to be in our community building those trust relationships, as well as engaging with our youth. We have over 1,800 children in our district that can attend our public schools, and only 1,500 do so. So there's quite a large number of kids that are in our school that have no contact in a proactive way with our police department. For whatever reasons or how that it affects this department, I would think that those numbers, the 1,500 and the 300 some kids, those will change, and more children will be not in our schools because of COVID-19, because they may have somebody in their family or them themselves with immunization, who is a health risk. So I, as I said, the memo was short and sweet and went to the MGL and that waiver request, and it seemed like the right time to take a look at that and check the boxes. There are a lot of strong feelings on the call. I certainly have very strong feelings about a whole bunch of these things. And I think it's a good objective test against not only state regulation, but state general law of where Easthampton is around a requirement that has generated a lot of conversation over the last 4 years.
Thank you. Shannon, did you want to read the equity letter that came to us?
Sure. So the Equity Steering Committee is a group of stakeholders that started 3 years ago that I've been a member of for 2.5 as a parent and also as a school committee member. We had a discussion last week and decided to break off into subgroups, one of them being a group of people that we met yesterday and talked about the SRO situation. and we came up with a letter that we'd like, I'm going to share with you. It says, "Dear school committee members, though we typically do not meet over the summer, members of the EHS and K through 8 equity steering committees were compelled to meet this summer to confer about school resource officers in Easthampton Public Schools. As a result of the combined meeting, our smaller SRO subgroup was formed to think about what next steps we could take to participate in this important conversation. We understand that you'll be discussing school resource officers at tonight's meeting, and we are here to support you regardless of what action you take tonight. Our subgroup of the Equity Steering Committee would like to offer our help moving forward by bringing the lens of equity to a collaborative discussion about the role of police in Easthampton schools. We are happy to provide you with global data and information regarding experiences of underrepresented populations of students with SROs. We are also interested in forming local student and parent caregiver focus groups to collect data from our community, especially given that our equity committee's summer meeting could not be attended by as many students and parents, caregivers as normally participate during the school year. These data would work to inform how we can continue to facilitate movement towards a culture of equity and belonging in all of our schools. Thank you for your continued commitment to the students, families, and staff of Easthampton Public Schools. We want to underscore how important this topic is and how difficult it is for some to be delving into this conversation at this time. We are dedicated to providing momentum to keep issues of equity at the forefront of our vision of public schools. After deciding what recommendation to make to the superintendent tonight, please consider our offer to work with the school department and police department on paving a path forward. Sincerely, the members of the Equity Steering Subcommittee, members of the Equity Steering Committee subgroup on SROs in the Easthampton Public Schools. And if I can just add something really quick. Rick, I greatly appreciate you giving us your short version of your presentation, because that was one of the things that I was going to ask tonight is what is Rick's responsibilities? What's his role? What is he supposed to be doing in the schools? But that's neither here nor there. The other thing I want to say, yesterday, something that came up in part of our discussion was, it feels like right now with the reopening of the schools, we're designing a system for the majority. But we'd like to see a design for the margins. And I think this is a great step forward in doing that. We have a small population of people of color, and it's important to hear and to respect and to put their voices in the forefront here, not the majority.
Okay. So Dr. LeClaire, I have a question. And we can open this up to discussion, but as I read this, when we began this subject, it looked as though we would be voting on just doing a waiver right now and sending it in. But when I read waiver wording, it appears that before we do a waiver, before we vote on a waiver, we have to first outline the reasons for the waiver, the evidence and the data that backs up that request. That's what I'm reading, and a description of all the alternatives and resources that will be relied upon when you pass the waiver in. Is that correct? So are we simply talking about whether to go forward tonight with exploring whether or not we want to file this this waiver? Mayor, I see your hand up. Can you help us with this? You're muted.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Yeah, I mean, one, thank you for the consideration of the waiver. I know there's a ton of stuff on our agenda. I appreciate that greatly. I think, and this conversation around my request, is very, very important. But I don't see, and certainly will defer to Sue, that there's a school committee vote to be taken, but an administrative decision to be made by the superintendent to file the waiver or not.
Okay.
And so if I could add to that, I believe the school committee would have the right to take a vote, as we spoke yesterday, Cindy, and I did consult our legal counsel. If you as the school committee body were the appropriating arm of the funding for the school resource officer, and the school district is not. We are not the funding resource for either one of the positions.
Correct.
So I don't believe, according to my legal counsel, and I don't know if the mayor wants to weigh in, because you are not the body that appropriates the funding, I don't believe you can have a vote. I mean, maybe you could do it as a symbolic gesture if you'd like to direct me, but Mayor, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I mean, the MGL doesn't discuss the appropriation source. It's more around data, but I think it ends up in the same place that, I mean, sure, a symbolic vote, but it's an administrative measure. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going back to, it's not a school committee vote, it's up to the superintendent to apply for the waiver? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Mary, question, I have many.
Yes.
I'm very confused.
I have a lot to say on this matter, but I think that it is important, given the light of this conversation, that we do discuss it and that we do move forward with a decision about how we want to direct our administration as the oversight body of our school administration. So I do suggest that we move forward with this conversation, provide some direction. We are the ones who have the MOU with the police department, and I think that is part of our purview, is to talk about this under those auspices.
Okay. Lori, anybody want to start weighing in?
I would like to jump in. Cindy,
Sure. Thank you, Marissa.
I think I want to speak carefully because it's a difficult subject. But as someone who was on the school committee in 2017 when we had the incident that prompted the Attorney General's investigation of our district, I see this conversation in a very specific institutional history, and it's not a conversation that's new or that we're starting from scratch upon, but a conversation that's been ongoing with very high stakes for our district. And so with all due respect, I completely trust the excellent reports of the many people that we heard from today about what a great presence Officer Ravowski is for many kids in our district. I also remember that he was the arresting officer at the incident that prompted the Attorney General's investigation. And I say that just because I think we can't pretend like there is this true separation between an SRO as sort of a conduit to the criminal justice system and an SRO in this sort of more idealized community policing role where it's a non-uniformed officer in our buildings connecting with students. At least in the specific history of Easthampton Public School, not deep history within the past 3 years, the connection between the criminal justice consequences for young people and our SRO role are closely linked. And so, at the time, we had a different superintendent, we had a different high school principal, but in the search for both of those roles, it was centerpiece of that search that we would have a really sensitive, informed new leadership on these issues. And so it feels to me, I felt blindsided by the discovery that the grant was made, and now this idea, well, we applied for the grant, but now let's delay and let's have these slow conversations, to have already leapt forward in suggesting that we have this new position seems to have advanced the action and now wants to backtrack and have conversation. And I think if we're going to have that conversation, I want to have it grounded in the very specific institutional history of our district. At the time, the committee looked into getting a waiver to the SRO position. At the time, that Massachusetts general law would then require us to have a state officer assigned to our building. And we much preferred having an Easthampton police officer assigned to our building for all the wonderful reasons that we have good connections to our community police officers. But that was part of the conversation 4 years ago. So I just want to remind us that this is ongoing. And, you know, and I think it's always worth saying, like, as someone who's on the school committee back there, I had some tough conversations with Chief Alberti, and, you know, here I am sort of having a tough conversation with our Officer Rogalski. I also, due to the storm, had to dial our local police and fire last week, and I was so grateful to have their services. Also aware that my faith in those services are a reflection of my experience as a white person, and it is different for our students of color. So I'll pause there for now.
Thank you. Anybody else right now?
An administrative point of clarification. Allison, I just don't, but the MOU, and maybe this is the MOU is signed between you and the chief of police, or you and the school committee, because I know that the waiver language talks about superintendent makes a request to file, like I'm requesting you, superintendent, to file that waiver in consultation with the police chief. Is that because the MOU is between the two of you?
Yes.
Okay. It's not a school committee document, and it's not something that I sign on to. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Shannon?
If I just want to make a comment. The other option that I would be very curious to look into is also what Northampton did in their community, and they wrote a resolution to remove, sorry, excuse my cats. They wrote a resolution to remove the SRO from the building. While I realized they also lost funding for their SRO, it was another option without having to go down the waiver, the waiver route. One thing I do want to mention is, I don't know about everybody else. I'm not looking to eliminate the position completely. I just don't feel like officers need to be in our buildings. Like Marissa said, I totally agree with the community policing, et cetera, et cetera. They, I just don't want to, I don't think they need to be in our buildings.
So you would like to see that position be reaching out to the community rather than being actually in the schools?
Well, I'm pretty sure that's what the grant was for community policing. So it could go either way. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct, but I would defer to Bob.
So,
you can answer that.
We wouldn't have to give it back. We wouldn't have to, get rid of the guy we just hired. And, and it's just, for so many students, it is hard enough for them to get out of bed in the morning, to go to a school where they don't see people that look like them. And to see somebody, and Rick, I know you don't wear a uniform, but in the past, they did. They had a gun, they had handcuffs, and people still know who the police officer is. And it makes it 10 times harder for these kids to walk into those buildings, knowing that there's a police officer in there. That is all I have.
Jonathan, Lori?
Marin had his hand raised. I'd be willing to defer.
Did you? Sorry, I missed you, Marin.
Okay. I feel like we're talking about whether or not we're going to have a conversation, and also starting to have little parts of the conversation. So I guess from my perspective, I think we need to decide that we're going to have this conversation, and then go in and start having this conversation. And as a part of that, I would say it is a very concerning process that got us to today, right? And this is why, as a school committee member, I don't want to just defer and leave it in somebody else's hands. Yes, it was the mayor and the chief who went down this path and chose to seek this grant. They asked the school superintendent and our grant writer to be able to actually write the grant, and then they submitted it. The mayor and the chief signed off on it. And so we can deal with our part of that. We're not the ones who signed off on it or submitted it. But I think that we do have the right to talk about it. We do have the right to talk about an SRO in our school buildings. And I believe we should get into that conversation and not just keep talking about if we should have this conversation.
I thought we were having the conversation. That's where I thought we were what we were doing right now. Jonathan, you were going to speak. Sorry.
As is often sometimes the case, I am kind of content in most ways to sit back and listen to the perspectives of others, because that's ultimately most important to informing my own decision. This is something that in light of trying to have the conversation, this is something I've kind of gone back and forth in my own head about, as I've thought, first of all, my first initial reaction of, not understanding the role that a police officer would play in a pre-K through 8 school. But as I've thought about this, and the point that I kind of continue to fall back on as my point of indecision is the chaotic and unsafe world that we live in. And I know that COVID has shifted our attention greatly. And I know that it can be easy to forget the way that things were before this happened. But we were very recently in a world where school shootings were a pervasive part of everyone's experience. And although I certainly recognize and am sympathetic to the voices who feel unsafe with a police officer in our schools, as a young person, in many ways, I have myself felt unsafe in the presence of law enforcement. And yet I come back to this idea of, if something terrible were to happen in our schools, where the threat was not inside the walls, but from coming outside of them, be it Easthampton or, we're not a closed bubble. I kind of keep coming back to the idea that having an officer as a first line of defense in that situation, that I don't think is by any means a stretch of the imagination, is a value. But I don't think that that's the sole reason to make a decision otherwise. So it's just that's just me telling you what I've been sort of rattling around in my head, and the thing that I'm sort of trying to grapple with, as I, otherwise wholeheartedly agree with many of the perspectives that have been shared thus far. So just so you know, that's where I'm thinking, that's where my thinking's at. And I continue to want to sit back and listen to perspectives, because that's going to be the most important thing here.
Thank you. Lori?
Thank you so much for that segue, Jonathan, because I listen all the time, but I'm not often quiet. And you can all see I'm being very quiet about this. And if I had to vote, I think I would abstain. And I would abstain because I would put too much of what has happened to me personally. I've been supported by SROs in the districts where I have taught. I feel very lucky that I can pick up the phone and I know that somebody's going to be at my door, which has to be locked and it has to be opened because something's going on in my classroom. That's not to say that happens in Easthampton. And that's not to say that that happens just with people of color. In fact, what comes to mind happened with white students. And I've been in many districts in the Valley. I can understand the pain that our community went through. And one of the reasons I ran was try to help that pain. But I'm not ready to say that we don't need a school resource officer, because I heard the list of things that he does. Even if the DARE program doesn't work, we need to find a program that works, and maybe an officer can help with that program. I think with the right training, that officer won't be a social worker. I listened to Jen. I really value what you said, but I also work in large districts where we would never have enough adjustment counselors. Right now, there's funding to bring somebody in that can help, not necessarily help the best way that person can help, but as a teacher in the public schools, we need all the help we can get. Do they have to be sensitive to the needs? Do they have to be sensitive to the feelings? And we have to make sure that somebody doesn't feel that they're being victimized just because of their skin color or because they speak with an accent. So I'm listening to everything, but it would be very hard for me either way because I value, as I said, when I wanted everyone just to speak for 2 minutes, I wasn't choosing sides. I hear you and I empathize with you. But I believe there can be good, that if it's coming from a grant, that we're not losing the adjustment counselors we need. We're not losing some more ESL teachers we need. We're getting an addition. We can't play with that funding. So those are my feelings. I won't say any more because, as I said, I'm very tired.
Well, can I ask you why, if you feel the way you do, why you would abstain?
Because our community is still so wounded, because an SRO did something that was horrific and it perpetrated and something that caused such a huge divide in this community. I don't want to add more to that divide. I'm not saying.
Okay, sorry, it wasn't an SRO that did something.
I know it was, I know the story, but I know, I understand. The relative, and then it caused I understand all that, but I'm just saying that's where a lot of this started, and we've moved so far, and I don't want to make any decision that's going to make us step backwards because I want to help the situation. So I would say that I'm listening, and I have so many feelings, and I really feel I can't clearly think about this now, and it's horrible to say, and we don't want anyone to think we're putting it on the back burner, but you can hear I am losing my voice. I have spoken so many hours on Zooms that you people see and Zooms that you don't see. I'm on so many committees. I had to think about what was going to happen in the own district I teach in last night. This is a very serious decision, and what we have to decide now, not this, I'm sorry, we have to decide how to best educate during COVID, because there's going to be no SRO in school because the students aren't going to be in school. So I agree that we should, sorry to say, put it aside just so we can dedicate the appropriate thought and energy to this extremely crucial decision. That's what I'm saying, not that it isn't important. Sorry.
Thank you. No, thank you. Mayor, you had your hand up.
Yes, with appreciation to everyone who has spoken so far tonight. I mean, the reason for the waiver request from my office certainly it has to do with a lot of different things. Very low on the totem pole for me on this, and as I say that word, I think it just goes to implicit bias in all of us, and especially me, is that it's an objective standard. And there's a lot of emotion around these issues and policing and the role of policing and how ordinances and laws have been created. So why not do an objective check of this with the Commissioner of Education rather than, go back into history. Let's see how far we have come. Let's see what the data says. Certainly the district and the mayor's office and a couple of legal offices have pulled together reams of data, around this issue. So let's check in. Let's do it now. And I hear the reopening and the remote and what the point is. We're not losing grant money. I mean, it's a community policing grant. We chose to use it for an SRO. It switches to a community policing grant. We already have a community police liaison. This isn't about, and for those who might, please don't think this is an attempt on my part to change any part of the city budget, including the police's. I really do think that the resources are better put in our community based on the data that the school district has about these events. And right now, I think we need every resource where it can be best used. And SROs with remote learning doesn't make a lot of sense as far as dollars. So I understand it stuffs an already very full agenda for us all. But let's do an objective test on this and file the waiver. And that's the purpose of that. And I just want to make sure I was clear.
I try to be last, not so I have the last word, so feel free to jump. I just try to be last so that I make sure that everybody has a chance to speak. So I have a lot of thoughts on this, back and forth. Like Lori, I am concerned, and like Jonathan. So in January, had we known that this grant was a possibility, I believe that we would have had a presentation at that time, and we would have had robust discussion as to whether or not we should do this. And I think in some ways it would have been a different conversation. What happened is we were surprised. We did not know about this. So then all of a sudden, while the nation is really grappling with systemic racism, as it always has, but it's come to light, we are all dealing with it. In the middle of a pandemic, people are risking their lives to protest and to speak out against injustice and inequality. And that is testament to how strong the feelings are in this nation. And a movement is started to change systemic racism, bring about equality, and to get rid of injustice. So in the midst of all of that, and I have really worried for all the people who protest. They are brave, and I respect their passion. But I also am very frightened because it is a horrible time to be speaking out and marching and protesting. I'm grateful at least this we're doing safely by Zoom. But it really speaks to how important this is. And I know that school districts across the nation are really planning on starting the school year with two things: giving students time to talk and process about their reaction to this pandemic, but also their understanding of what's been going on in our nation. I know that each school is planning on starting those conversations at the very beginning. And there are important conversations to have with our youth because they haven't had a chance to talk to a teacher about this. And there's a lot of pain going on, and there's a lot of worry and concern. So this was hard timing to have a new position when everything is so raw. But on the other hand, my experience as Lori's has been very positive. I've seen the relationships that SROs can have with students. I have seen them work as of a student support team, and true concern and empathy for the students and their lives going through. I have seen firsthand some very, very positive experiences. That is not to say that is the experience for everybody. I understand. But here's my we are remote, and we're going to stay remote until it's safe. And who knows when that's going to be. But we are building a huge school. And as Jonathan said, I teach sociology at my school. And one of the things that we grapple with every year is school violence in terms of school shootings. And the numbers that go up are ridiculous every year. I appreciate the fact that we're having a safety break in that way. My question is, if we file this waiver, is it just for 1 year? And when we build a new school, are we going to want to revisit the position? Going to have a large number of students in a building during times that can be pretty violent. And I don't know how long this waiver is for. I'm hoping and thinking that it's a year, but I'm thinking we may want to rethink this. Whatever we decide tonight, we may think it as we build this new school. Right now, we have time to look at it. We have time to think about the issues involved. We have time to get input from the community. And so I guess my question is, do we need to make a statement tonight? And if we do make a statement and we ask Dr. Leclerc to file this waiver, is the waiver? So those are my questions. I don't think any of this is easy. Our school committee has read every email, and there are many in support of the SRO position, and there are many who are not in support. And so it's a tough conversation during really, really tough times. I feel for everybody's passion. Dr. Leclerc, do you have an answer for that about the waiver?
I do not, and I asked legal counsel today, and they did not have an answer. It's not, it's not something that's done regularly by any of the clients. Our current district, our counsel has, so he didn't have experience with communities that have filed waivers. But I do have a suggestion that I would like to put forward to this committee for consideration. The equity committee at the high school was a group that was started a few years ago, and we have a few school committee members that are on that committee. And last year, we started a K-8 equity committee to focus on work around equity issues at that level. And I believe Marin's on that. Are you on that committee, Marin? So there is a school committee member on each level. Those committees are made up of parents, staff, administration, school committee members, and we have facilitators from the Collaborative for Education. As the high school committee has been nearing the end of their work related to the MOA with the Attorney General's office, because that MOA ended, we have been working to define what's next for those committees, for the not only the high school, but also the K-8. And I have asked those committees to think about serving in an advisory capacity to myself and my leadership team. And the point I would like to make is, I asked that group last week. We shared a lot of uncomfortable conversations, and there are people that are in this call now that can speak to that. And, I asked them if, we could start a dialogue around, developing a task force. And I think Shannon read a letter that was developed by a subcommittee of that committee. I don't know who the people were that worked on that. I'm guessing Shannon was one of them, but she could speak to that better. And, my suggestion would be, if that's the group that should be advising me on equity issues, perhaps that's the group that should take the lead in kind of having a task force to dig into these issues, of which I would want to be a part. But I'm just saying that is maybe a role for this group. And so I put that suggestion out there for consideration.
And we actually offered to do that, is
Yes,
really
you did.
what that letter was
We had a lot of dialogue around it.
Oh, no, I meant the letter was trying to say that we would definitely like to be involved. And that's what we talked about yesterday.
So then my understanding is you are proposing that the equity committee works on helping you to decide whether or not to apply for the waiver. Is that what you're?
Well, I think, before we even get to that, I think we need to answer some fundamental questions around, as Shannon, I wrote down, Shannon said, what is Rick's role? What is the role of the SRO? I think there are so many misconceptions. I think we need to come up with some understandings about the role of the school resource officer. And we need to look at studies and literature together. I think I don't think that the sole purpose should be, are we applying for a waiver or not? I think there are aspects that we need to dive into. But I don't think it's just me that should be making that decision. I think it should be the equity committee who should be serving in an advisory capacity to me.
That's certainly, Maren, go ahead. That certainly seems reasonable to me. I feel like we're approaching something that is far from accomplished and finished in terms of preparation. Maren?
Thank you. Yeah, so this is obviously a very intense and emotional conversation that we're having as a country, and we're trying to have as a community. I think that it's been said multiple times, but I just want to reiterate again. This is not about personal. This is not about any issues with particular officers within our community. But it is also about structure. And I think that that is what has been raised by numerous people speaking during public speak. It is about structure, and it is about whether or not as a school committee, we want to have a structure where a police officer is in our building day in and day out. And that is very concerning to me. I'm not, and I think that what Dr. Leclerc just mentioned, I think it is very accurate, listening also when Rick had pointed out the number of different things that he does, right? So there's lots of different things that the SRO does that is supportive of the schools. Being on a safety review committee of our new building is critical. Yes, school shootings happen around this country way too often right now. And so, yes, we need to be thinking about safety for our new school, and we need to be implementing those safety protocols into our new building. And I know as somebody on the school building committee, that has been very much a part of our conversation and very much a part of setting up how that building is being built and put in place to be able to keep our kids safe. The question of whether or not we need an officer in the building at that moment when they are just moments away is a different conversation though. So I think that there's a number of things that our SRO role does and is a part of. I think it was the SSDI, I may have the acronym incorrect, but SSDI team sounded like something that's a very important role. There's things that was very much mentioned about the interaction with youth in our community and that focus. Those are all really important things. And I think that it is important for our community, for our youth, to have positive interactions with our police officers. So I'm all for that, and I'm all for continuing that. What I'm not in positive enforcing is that we should not have an officer part of the criminal justice system in our school building. What percentage of students do we have to say feel uncomfortable having a police officer there that we actually have to give validity to their experience? If only 10% people feel uncomfortable with a police officer, should we ignore that? Or should we say, yeah, you're coming to school, you're required by law to come to the school, and we're forcing you to feel uncomfortable because there's a police officer there that is ultimately all kinds of good positive reasons to be there and social work and stuff like that. But ultimately, what that police officer is about the criminal justice system. And I do not believe that that criminal justice system needs to be something that our youth have to interact with day in and day out at our school. So yes, there are lots of great things that the SRO role can do as a part of our community and part of our school structures, but I do not think that person needs to be in our school buildings on a daily basis. Again, coming into lecture on something like a DARE program or whatever else is deemed a better program if we wanted to move in a different direction. But that's for a specific reason to enter into the building, not on a daily basis, not there to greet our students and make whatever percentage of our students feel uncomfortable or not want to see that officer standing there in front of them. That should not happen on a daily basis. So I'm all for looking to our equity group, which yes, I'm a part of as part of the pre-K to 8 building, pre-K to 8 group of that. Shannon is the high school group of that. So I'm all for it going to getting a little bit more feedback, a little bit more, developing the reasons why we want to apply for this waiver and maybe reasons how we might restructure the MOU between the school department and the police department to give better structures around there. We did some work, of course, you and Marissa were a part of that in the past, but I think this is now, again, another opportunity for us to relook at that and redevelop that relationship and reinforce where are we at today and where we want to move towards the future. So I think looking at reasons to have a waiver and rewriting the MOU is great things for the equity committee to do, but I also think that we as a school committee right now can give a little bit of direction about that's where we'd like to have these people be looking, and this is the direction that I would like to get more information and support from them.
Maren, the only thing I wanted to say, and I'm really not challenging what you're saying, but I just want to clear up. The high school is close to our safety complex. Our new school is not going to be, and moments count. So the idea that, and it's an unfortunate statistic, but every minute counts. An emergency
but as you know, as a part of the school building committee, that there are double locking doors, there's safety glass, there's a whole bunch of protocols set in place that if there was the feeling of a risk, our kids are safe. Our kids have ability to lock the doors. Even if you get past the main doors, the doors to the halls, their actual areas can be locked. There's video cameras there to recognize the potential. I mean, our police department has a drone that they use to do surveillance of our community already. There's already things that you can ask questions about whether or not they should or should not have, but these are things that are already in place. So there is a reason to have security, and those things are being put into our new building. Having a police officer in the building at that time, I don't think automatically, with looking at the statistics of police officers and dealing with school shootings, about whether that automatically increases the safety or not in that building.
Okay, Bob would like to answer at least a piece of this. Is it okay with everybody that we let him respond to the questions that we've thrown out? Could you give me a thumbs up if it's okay with you? All right. So, Bertie, you had something you wanted to say?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for listening to me again. So one of the things I want to point out, just kind of piggybacking off of what Maren just said, having worked hand in hand with him on the design of the school, the new school building, one of the things that's also in there is a school resource officer that we collectively designed at the entrance of the school, of the new school. So I just want to point that out as I did work with Maren on that. But a couple of quick things I want to just kind of address. If being where we are with the virtual opening and certainly COVID, if it looks as though this is going to go to the steering committees plural, I mean, I'm happy to let the school committee know that I will pull both of my officers, one specific to community policing, and Rick Rogowski he's over his head right now in detective work, assisting my overworked and overwhelmed detective bureau. So I have plenty of work during this virtual opening for my officers, and community policing work is part of that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't want the school community to think that there's pressure from the police department that you don't have time to put this into your steering committees and decide or determine which direction that the community wants to go. Again, we, the police, are going to do whatever the community and the school committee deems is best for the community. That being said, the other thing I want to point out is I want to read one short passage from our grant as it cycles around school-based policing. School districts and law enforcement agencies may not be able to sustain assigned SROs in the K through 12 setting, but officers and school personnel can still collaborate to increase student safety and reduce crime. And it continues on, but I think it kind of goes back to me a little bit where we're still available to the school no matter what. We're part of this community. Our kids all go to school here. I think that it may be best. We have the opportunity, I think, there's a rare opportunity during COVID, to put this through the proper channels that the school committee deems necessary. But I just wanted to reiterate that my police officers are still going to be available to the school. If this does go into the steering committee's plural direction, we're happy to support that. We're happy to support whatever the school committee decides. But I just don't want any pressure being placed on anybody because of the grant or police officers. And that we're going to be engaged with this conversation. As I'm sure you know, there's many police officers that are also on this call that have a vested interest because their children go to these schools. So with that, I hope that helps a little bit.
Thank you. Any other questions, thoughts? Everybody's quiet. These are really tough. I cannot take any comments from the community right now. I'm sorry, we closed public speak. There's really only the school committee, and we can ask questions of Chief Alberti, but that's about it.
I also recommend that they send an email.
Say that again?
Right, we can recommend that they send an email?
Absolutely, absolutely. Everybody should send. We do read them. So it sounds like we have a couple of possibilities. We can turn this over to the Equity Committee, and Chief Alberti will use his officers for community outreach. And it, in many ways, as Leclerc said, it already is an issue that is going to be put off, because if we said yes, there is no way, because we're in remote learning, that anybody's going to be in the buildings anyway. I think we don't have, here's my feeling, I think we have enough information. I don't know how long the waiver is. That's one thing for me. Is it forever? And we don't have an answer to that. Do we have data for Dr. Leclerc to fill out with the waiver? And I don't believe we have that. Well, I don't know what's everybody.
If I may.
Yeah.
I'm certainly interested to hear. I think I can maybe assume the direction of it, but I would certainly be interested in receiving a recommendation from the steering committees, considering the unique role that they play in the school district around this particular topic. Around the conversations of those committees, I think that if it sounds like there's an opportunity here to maintain officers who are connected with the students in the schools, but not necessarily in the building. I'd say whichever path we end up going down, I think it would be extremely valuable to make sure that the individuals in those positions are part of the equity training and conversations that are happening pretty much at all times. That's something that I'm sort of thinking about as we go through this, that no matter what we do, I think it's really important that we sort of, fit that into the MOU or wherever, to make sure that they're a part of that conversation and that sort of lifelong learning that we're all doing.
Mayor?
Yeah, so the waiver is from the requirement of having an SRO under MGL. This is not a commitment by the school committee, superintendent, chief of police, or mayor to commit not to have one.
Okay.
So I would just say by the function of a waiver, you know, the time limit or whatever we want to call it, I don't think there has to be one. Because the waiver can be rolled back and the MGL stands. As well, I think there's a unique opportunity to realign our resources to what we're hearing from our community, whether it's physically in a school or not. There's needed support and it needs to be community-based. So just a clarification.
Thank you. That helps.
To add on to what Jonathan was saying, I just wanted to say that we could also look at the policy that we have and make changes to that. That is what the school committee has the authority to do. So, you know, it's something that we can talk about in a work session or something like that and really look at it from that standpoint, you know, and go from there.
Right.
But I am totally willing to head up the equity group and get this going and get data and get more involvement in the community, getting all voices heard, not just the majority. Let's put it that way.
If what I'm understanding is that the mayor is saying that we could direct the superintendent, that the school committee's preference is to submit for this waiver, but then we could continue to staff an SRO position if that's our district's choice, then I personally would be glad to have that flexibility going forward, and I would support directing the superintendent in that direction.
Okay, I'm confused again. So if we got the waiver, it doesn't mean that we can't have one later on, but shouldn't we do the exploration with the committee first and look at the policies first before we submit a waiver? It just doesn't, it feels like everything we're doing right now is jumbled. And, you know, we were pretty methodical when it came to looking at school reopening, and this doesn't finished. And that's why I'm really uncomfortable. Mayor?
Yeah, so I would say we're looking at two pandemics right now, unfortunately, at the same time. One is public health. I'd say a subset is mental health, but another one is also the deep questioning of law enforcement as well as policy of the majority and how it affects the minority. The request for the waiver, I would support Marissa in a vote where the school committee strongly suggests that the superintendent files that waiver. Of course, the waiver itself, once filed, needs to be approved by the commissioner of the Department of Education and Secondary Education. The data that I see in the waiver request of how to write it, it's data that we collect anyways and have to report out to DESE. So I think that there's clearly an interest and a need for deep community conversation around this. But I also don't think that the administrative burden to file the waiver, especially given its objectivity of the data points, is a two-step process. I think there are two different things going on.
If I can just step in again, sorry. And I agree with Marissa and Mayor in regards to if it's a situation where please start the process, then absolutely I would say yes. And we can do the investigation while this is all happening. It's not going to happen overnight. We know this. And I completely support the waiver. I was the one who brought it up. So, if Cindy, you feel like we need to make a decision tonight, then I say yes. I would ask Allison to go forward with it. And then we would continue the community discussions on how we go forward in following through that waiver.
Okay. So my only concern is that I really feel jumbled about this. I do feel our community and emotions, pain and passion. But I really feel unfinished about this. And I think that given all the things that are on the school agenda and the school committee agenda, if we file a waiver, we're not going to discuss SROs later on. I just don't think we will, because it's going to be a done deal. I really, I just feel so unfinished about this. I would much prefer that we do the work, that we go through the steps of finding out the information. We meet with the equity team and get their recommendation, and then make a decision to file a waiver. That's my comfort level. And certainly, it may not be everybody else's comfort level. I just don't like us doing these things. Lori was torn, Jonathan's torn, I'm torn. I just don't like doing things that like we didn't really finish. Dr. Leclerc?
Point of order, this was brought as new business tonight, this discussion. So I'm wondering if it is appropriate to bring this forward as new business tonight and then allow you a week to thoughtfully consider this information, and then you can make your motion next week. I don't want people to feel like they're backed into a corner. And again, I'll do whatever you want. I'm just wondering, it's 8:45, and it was a new business item, and very often with new business, you hear about it at one meeting and then you vote upon it at the next meeting. So I just put that out there for your consideration. Thank you.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I don't know if Sue Colby, who is someone we turn to all the time, if you want to weigh in. Is it new business that we should wait another week for?
Yes, I would agree with Allison, Dr. Leclerc.
It makes it easy. So, and it sounds like this is something that we will be discussing next week. Is that correct? Shannon?
I just don't know. I don't know. I didn't see Julianne still on this call, but she's the head of the equity, group. So I don't know. Hi. I don't know if will we be able to get together and get some information put together for next week?
I mean, I think we can do anything first. But second, we talked about wanting to have parent, caregiver, and student focus groups to gather that information.
Julianne, we're not opening schools right now. What if we put this 2 weeks from now? Would that sound better? Like we're more prepared? I see some heads nodding. I know I feel that we're more prepared and we have more information. And if we gave you 2 weeks, you're nodding your head. You look like you're much happier with that idea.
I'm much happier with that idea. I definitely need to defer to the members of the equity steering committees, but and maybe Allison as well. I could defer to Allison as well.
Well, I would just to be clear, I'm not proposing this to put more work on Julianne because she is busy with remote learning, she's working with instructional planning and professional development right now.
Yeah.
So she honestly doesn't need one more thing.
You would head it up though.
Yeah, I was
No, and I absolutely will. I just need
referencing-
contact.
Yeah, I was referencing that to Shannon's point and someone else's point, that if you want to give me a directive to file a waiver, you could do that next week or the week after, whatever. And then, as I believe Shannon said, and I don't want to talk to Shannon, the other pieces of this are going to take a longer period of time. And so that could be happening as an aside in an ongoing manner. But I don't think Julianne honestly is going to be able to pull focus groups together for you in the next 2 weeks. I would not put that on her.
Thank you.
And I think I just want to just clarify one more time that I'm understanding this as a two-step process. One is to file for a waiver. A waiver does not contract us to remove our SRO positions. We can have a waiver in place on the books for our policy and still keep having an SRO in our building if that's the will of the district and the committee. So I don't think, and I think also it seems to me procedurally, given this is really a policy issue, that we shouldn't displace that responsibility to the equity committee. I would certainly want to hear from the equity committee about the experience of students and families in the building, but this very policy rooted decision of do we want to file a waiver, that reads to me as the responsibility of the school committee, and to file for it does not commit us to any actual decision making at this point.
So Marissa, are you trying to say decide now or in a week or two?
I mean, it seems like a lot of people would rather sleep on it. For me, it seems like there's no risk in filing a waiver. It is indicative of the type of progress that we've been trying to make in the district, but it doesn't contract us to anything. So that's where I come from. But I think I might be numerically in the minority for tonight.
Mayor?
Marissa, if you're in the minority, then I'm with you. I do. I think it's an administrative step forward. The waiver isn't granted. I think there's plenty of community conversation all around, but I do just want to get a clarification though from Allison. So you will not file the waiver without a vote or specific direction from the school committee?
That is correct.
Okay.
If I may, I'll just say I have no problem with the directive of a waiver tonight. And in fact, I believe Marissa and Nicole, you're probably in the majority here anyways. I agree that, having flexibility never hurts. But just like I said in our previous meeting about remote opening, I think, being careful and methodical, especially in this moment where we do have so many strong emotions involved in this, I think it's really important and paramount that we take the time to consider it, but it doesn't sound like taking that vote on the waiver is ultimately our final decision. And for that reason, I'm open to it.
Yeah, I would just say I think we can very easily, it sounds like, move forward with a decision about a waiver. And then say a month from now, we schedule an opportunity to have gathered some input and some more data and more conversations and come back as a community and as a committee and make a decision or not, but a sort of ongoing conversation when there's a little bit more time and space. Also, as we're headed towards whether or not we have schools openings and, but again, it doesn't have to be this week. It doesn't have to be next week. So it'll be the following week to make a decision on all that stuff. But moving forward on the waiver, I think we do have, I do think we actually have a majority that is interested in moving forward with the waiver.
In that case, I would be glad to make a motion.
I just want to hear from Lori, who's been quiet for a while, and I'd like her last thoughts. She has no thoughts.
I've been listening to everybody so carefully, and we've gone in so many circles. A waiver is good to do. No, we should wait. We should gather more information. I'm here taking it all in. And so if we do a waiver, we can still change our mind anyway. So it means nothing. That's what I'm hearing. This seems like a waste of time if we have to get a waiver to then a month from now say, well, we have the waiver, but now we are going to put an SRO because we have the money. Am I correct, Mayor? Is that what it means? But why explain? How can a waiver then we can change our mind
Waiver,
after.
I mean, I strongly feel that we don't meet the data requirements to have a school resource officer on our school campus. And I think that the community has a greater need and will for a stronger community policing program. The waiver exempts us from Mass General Law of having that SRO on premise, but it also allows us not to have to sign up with the Massachusetts State Police to have a state police officer assigned as our SRO. So it just waives that requirement, but allows the two folks who were assigned or are assigned now for SRO work to community policing, which we already have a liaison and it's set up. So it's a shift in focus of existing staff. And the waiver is to good for you. Yep.
Told you, it's taken longer tonight.
Oh, they're complicated. So,
all right, Marissa, go for it.
I would make a motion that as a committee, we direct the superintendent to file for the waiver, knowing that ultimately our decisions about how we actually staff or hold these positions are ongoing and not committed to via filing the waiver.
I second that.
Okay. Any more discussion? Roll call vote. So Mayor, you're off to my left, so you're the first up. You have to unmute.
Aye.
Okay. Garcia?
Bri Garcia, aye.
Jonathan?
Jonathan Schmidt, aye.
Marissa?
Marissa Curry, aye.
Shannon?
Shannon Dunham, aye.
Maren?
Aaron Goldstein, aye.
And Cynthia Kwasinski, aye. So this very complicated, strange issue is done. At least
it's not done.
No, just it's done for tonight.
I do suggest that we do set a date, though,
yes,
for when this is going to be reconvened and when other groups can report back to this group.
But given that we made the decision tonight, I would like to schedule it much further down the road so that people have some time to get us reopened and concentrate on curriculum, and we don't drive Julianne crazy. So is it okay that we plan it for, let's say, October? Does that feel okay?
Can you repeat that?
You cut out. I didn't hear the date.
I'm thinking of October. So on instruction in August and September, and when we can take a breath, then we give this the attention that it deserves.
I'm not sure. Bill Evans has his hand up. I don't know if you guys can see him.
Hi, folks. Does that help?
Yeah, we hear you.
So, hi, everybody. Bill Evans, the principal at Easthampton High School, and I deeply appreciate the conversation tonight. Just in terms of the Equity Steering Committee being able to give an informed report to the committee, I feel that it's really important to be able to have strong access to a number of students and a number of family members, and that access really won't begin until we start school, and even then it's going to be hindered by being remote. I would urge the committee to give the Equity Steering Committee subgroup some more time to be able to really get good information that really comes from all the populations. As Shannon pointed out, it's easy to get a majority, but it's much more important to get the minority.
Are you feeling like late October will still not be enough time? Are you thinking?
Yeah, so as a high school principal, I'm going to say that I have no idea, because this is going to be a year, unlike any other. I would say if you could check in with us at the beginning and middle of October without committing us to a particular date, I promise we will work on it in earnest.
Does that feel everybody?
Yeah, I wonder if Shannon and Maren, could you report back to the school committee, like on a, in a regular way,
weekly,
like communicate our progress?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, certainly. As a committee, report back what's on their agenda on a weekly basis. So we could certainly do that.
That sounds good.
That's a quick question that very likely maybe nobody has an answer to, but is there a expected sort of turnaround time for this waiver process that we might expect to hear back once it's submitted? Does anybody have an idea as to that?
I'm guessing it's gonna take some time because it's got to go through DESE.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know any other school district that's ever done it, so I just don't know anybody
Right.
that's done it. So.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was
Can't speak from
expecting. I'm
experience.
just imagining that as a ideal time to make sure that, if not sooner, that we be sure to pick the conversation back up.
Okay. All right. So.
Really quick before we move on, I'm sorry.
Excuse
me? I could just ask anybody who's on this call that wants to have a voice in this conversation, please contact, either myself, Marion, Julianne, or one of the principals. And we'll definitely get you on the list and get some conversations going.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Superintendent update. Dr.
Sorry, what did you say, Cindy?
Superintendent update.
Oh,
Did
okay,
I put
thank
it out?
you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just didn't hear you. Yeah, I just got a few quick things. The survey results update. We haven't done any new surveys since our meeting last week. All reopening plan update. You voted for a full remote start. The district leadership team is now busy finalizing our plans for professional development and working to define practices and procedures to optimize engagement. We're fine-tuning schedules and organizing what will be needed for a remote start. The next thing on my agenda items are school building project update. The building project is progressing well. Work on the Rotary is continuing. We had a gas leak last Friday, but we're happy to report that no one was injured and the issue was resolved. And the other item under my update is the diversity and parent engagement position update. That position, I believe the job description was updated and it has been posted on School Spring if anyone wants to take a peek at it. It's currently open for applicants. Once it closes, there will be a hiring committee formed, which will include administrators, educators, and members of the equity committee. So that's all I have to report.
Okay. I want to clear up a couple of things. Maren, you had something you want to talk about?
I just had a question to follow up in terms of the fall reopening plans. When are we going to next get sort of a report back to this committee on that? Is that something we're expecting next week, or what's the sort of next steps from here?
We're finalizing the schedules now. I don't believe we'll have anything new to add next week. There's just a lot of kind of the finer details at this point that we're trying to come to some conclusions. And as you know, we're in contract negotiations or impact bargaining with teachers right now. So we're trying to work out some of the nuts and bolts around what the expectations will be of the educators. So that's still a work in progress.
But I thought that more information was then going to come back to this whole committee by next week in terms of speaking on these different groups.
Give me an idea of what you're looking for. I'm not sure what you're referencing.
Lori, I can reference, but go ahead if you've got some other question, Lori.
Lori, you're on mute. Okay.
It's related but unrelated. So if you want to continue with your questioning, Maren, then I can jump in about mine. It has to do with reopening, but.
Well, yeah, it sounds like there's conversations that are happening about reopening, both in terms of, like you mentioned, the impact bargaining with the union, as well as different ideas that, we made a vote last week, but there's still a lot to be discussing, the conversation about remote learning centers, the discussion about tents, the discussion about agendas and scheduling. I mean, it feels like there's a lot still out there. So, I mean, obviously it wasn't for tonight's agenda, but I was hoping that we would get that sort of next stage of information next week so that we can continue to have this conversation. It's also, this is a location where that information then gets out into our community as well, so that parents can continue to learn more details about what's coming as we move in that direction. So that's why I was just trying to get clarity on when you might be next reporting back to school committee, but also to the general community about those developing ideas.
And before you answer, Dr. LeClaire, because it goes with what Maren just asked, we heard tonight that there are people that are very interested in being in these partnership groups that we brought up last week. And I get emails about it, but then I was told that, I do policy, not procedure. So I just want to know how parents can get involved with us, with the educators, how these groups can be formed. Is it something that you want to post on the district website? Is it something that you want to ask people to write to you? Because we're hearing that people want to get involved to make this work. And we have already enlisted, as I mentioned tonight, we have a parent who's an epidemiologist, another one who's a tech support, we have a pediatrician, we have people that are helping us. And I want to get more support from parents who want to make this work for everybody, not just the majority, as Shannon's been mentioning, all of the people in Easthampton, the parents who are going to be at work and they don't know how they're going to make this work. That's why we have to work quickly. I've been saying it now since the beginning of June. So what can we tell parents right now? How do they get in touch with us to get into these groups? Or if there's so many, then there's a selection process, but we have to get rolling.
So I have a communication and governance group, and Cindy and Maren sit on that group. We meet Thursday, and I was going to talk to them about the family, getting family members involved in the discussions, and ask that group, who's been really the group that's been really focused on communication issues, what processes they would like to entail. There are some parents that sit on that group, and then I'll put that information in the logistical update I send out on Friday to families in the district.
That sounds like a great plan. Thank you.
That is a good plan. So I have a number of questions. First of all, I'd like to clear confusion. Evidently, I found out today, just before this, the Daily Hampshire Gazette put that we are going to be in a hybrid model November 4th. That is not correct.
I think they watched the beginning of our school committee meeting.
Yeah.
They never watched the end, what you actually voted on, and they never called for a quote or an interview.
Yeah. I think it was a legitimate, mistake, but I want to make sure that everybody knows, and perhaps you might have to put out in a clarification, and I know you send those out on Friday, but it might be helpful to put in a clarification that we are not scheduled for hybrid on November 4th, that it will be to be determined based on health metrics, because we certainly don't want to have everybody confused. So that was one concern I had. Another one, thank you, Lori, is bringing up the partnership groups. I like the idea of the communication team working on reaching out to them. We do have a lot of things, Maren, up in the air that it feels still unsettled. I think we're going to be unsettled for a very long time. But I do want us looking at tents, and I don't know who's even thinking about tents. But at some point, I would like to know if somebody is thinking about them. Because if we don't explore the use of tents and we don't price them out and find out if we can get them, it's never going to happen. And I think that I would at least like to know somebody is working on the issue, exploring it, finding out, getting prices. I had gotten prices earlier. I don't know the availability now. I certainly would be willing to help that. But the tents are the places where young people might have a chance, little ones, of meeting their teachers. We talked about setting up learning centers in tents. So I'd like to just kind of push that schedule and someone to look into that. And then the other thing I would like to push, and I know we've all worked so hard, there are a number of students in need, and parents have been sending us emails saying that they would like those special populations to receive some in-person services earlier than October 13th. I'm not saying it's a done deal, but I think we need to be looking into that possibility. I know we have a lot on our plate. I know we don't have schedules. We don't even know, all the pieces of the puzzle. But those are items that are crucial. If you have a child in need, I certainly understand that October 13th feels very far away. And have us just look at the feasibility of addressing those needs earlier. So those were my only, I just want to make sure, those were my only questions and feeling of urgency. Tents partnership, learning centers, students in need, up that date. Are we, I have a question. Are we okay with a school committee meeting on Tuesday? I think Dr. Leclerc, my feeling is they need a week or two to get some of these answers. So rather than call them all together for a work session to try to push this, I'm thinking that we could just go to a Tuesday meeting like we already have planned. Does that feel comfortable with everybody? I'm seeing Maren and Lori, Jonathan, the mayor. Okay, so Shannon and Marissa, I don't see you, so I don't know if that's okay. That sounds good?
Sounds good.
So we'll just go with, and Shannon, I don't know if you're away, but at least it seems like everybody is comfortable with that. I just feel like we're using a lot of time. It's important. These are all crucial issues, but we need people to have time to work on these issues. Otherwise, they'll never get anywhere. So that's good. Are we done? These pieces? Can we go on to our payroll and minutes? Lori? Yes, Lori, you're muted.
Sorry. The mayor had mentioned that it was necessary to talk to the person in charge of Parks and Rec about being able to use Nonotuck and also Pavilion. Have you been able to do that, Mayor, or is it something someone else needs to do? Did you talk to anybody or?
I just told Director Mason that the schools might reach out to investigate that space. One of the bigger concerns, or I would say the only concern that came up was bathrooms and cleaning and use of, and some of the bathrooms in Nonotuck Park, because of the low usage and how little is open, they've not been opened at all. So not insurmountable, but that's just what came up. And I didn't have, I just said, this conversation is probably coming your way. This is what's going on, but I don't have the details of what would be expected in age groups and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you. So Dr. Leclerc, is that something that you will follow through with? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're good. Let's go on to just payroll and minutes.
I make a motion to accept the school payroll dated 7/30/2020 in the amount of $360,353.57.
I second that.
Okay. So Jonathan, I know everybody shifted their orders. So Jonathan?
Jonathan Schmidt, aye.
Lori?
Lori Garcia, aye.
Marissa?
Marissa Curry, aye.
Aaron?
Aaron Goldstein, aye.
Shannon?
Shannon Dunham, aye.
Mayor?
Mayor LaChapelle, aye.
And Cindy Kuzensky, aye.
Sorry. I make a motion to accept the minutes for the 7/20/2020 work session.
I'd like to second that. Jonathan Schmidt, aye.
Okay. So Lori?
Muted.
Sorry, Laurie Garcia, aye.
Yeah, just stay unmuted. Stay on.
Marissa Curry, aye.
Maren?
Maren Goldstein, aye.
Janet, aye.
Mayor?
Mayor LaChapelle, aye.
Cindy Kuzensky, aye.
Make a motion to accept the minutes from the 7/27/2020 work session.
I'll second. Jonathan Schmidt, aye.
Laurie Garcia, aye.
Marissa Curry, aye.
Maren Goldstein, aye.
Shannon Dunham, aye.
Mayor?
Mayor LaChapelle, aye.
Cindy Kuzensky, aye.
Make a motion to accept the minutes from the 7/28/2020 regular session.
I'll second. Jonathan Schmidt, aye.
Laurie Garcia, aye.
Marissa Curry, aye.
Maren Goldstein, aye.
Mayor LaChapelle, aye.
Janet?
Shannon Dunham, aye.
Cindy Kuzensky, aye.
And I make a motion to accept the minutes from the 8/3/2020 work session.
I'll second. Jonathan Schmidt, aye.
Laurie Garcia, aye.
Marissa Curry, aye.
Maren?
Maren Goldstein, aye.
Mayor LaChapelle, Mayor LaChapelle, aye.
Hey, I was supposed to go before you.
It's okay. It's okay. We're good.
I'll make a motion for us to adjourn.
Well, wait. Shannon, I didn't hear your aye and I didn't give my aye.
Sue has something to say.
I said Shannon Dunham, aye.
Okay, I didn't hear that. Cindy Kuzensky, aye. Okay. So, Maren, you made a motion.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Hold on.
Oh,
Sue
no,
is.
Sue.
Sue's got something.
The hand block.
Sue
I need
needs us.
confirmation of your next meeting.
Confirmation of our next meeting. It will be next day at 6:00.
You cut
All
out
of it.
on the 18th?
Yes.
Yes.
Tuesday, the 18th.
Thank you.
6:00.
I make a motion for us to adjourn.
I
I'll second.
second that.
Go ahead.
Jonathan?
Oh, Jonathan Schmidt, aye. Right.
Laurie Garcia, aye.
Marissa Curry, aye.
Maren Goldstein, aye.
Shannon Dunham, aye.
Mayor LaChapelle, aye.
Cindy Kuzensky, aye. Have a wonderful night.
Good night, folks.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody who was there.
Thanks for attending.